A little bit lost this evening. I usually don't do live project like this. So, okay, let's start. Share my screen. All right. So the first thing, so let's talk about the project we are going to work on. So for this project, just a second, I think someone is coming. All right, let's talk about the project we are working on. For this project, we are okay. For this project, we are going to, and this is something I've done in a project I worked before. And I've actually worked on several projects that has implemented something like this. One of it, my coworker worked on it on a different project, and at a different company that I was working for at the time is actually something they also had in their system. So the project goes like this. You guys know when we SSH into our EC2 instance, we open port 22. And for the port 22, the best practice is to limit the source that can SSH into your EC2 instance to your IP address, right? For the SSH rule, we don't want to leave it as for the SSH rule, we don't want to leave the port for the SSH rule. The source that can SSH into your EC2 instance, we don't want to leave it at anywhere, especially 0.0.0.0/0. So for this project, we are going to work on a Python script that would pretty much scan all the security groups in our account and look for any security group that the SSH rule is open to the world. And if we have any SSH rule that is open to the world, it would also take an action and find any EC2 instance that that security group is attached to. And we can also take it further to terminate any EC2 instance that matches that criteria of having security group with SSH port open to the world. Do you guys understand? Or do you guys have any question?
Perfect, others.
Okay. All right. So let's start. The
So
first,
my question is the function going to scan different accounts, or is just going to be on one account scanning different, security groups?
we are just doing one account. We are not
Okay.
doing, so it will be one account, whatever, one account and whatever region we have configured in our access key. So it's just a mini project. So instead of doing it multiple, so the main goal is to make sure that it works, right? Then, because when you are writing it, you can just probably, you can implement it in the different accounts. So from your Python standpoint, you don't have to write your Python to be able to scan all the accounts. So you can write your Python code. It will work in any account you implement it in. Okay.
I have a follow-up question as this.
Sure.
So with the project we're about to do, you said it will terminate the instance. And given that you've done it before, wouldn't that kind of, let's imagine we have a critical EC2 instance that is hosting our important web servers and all that. But well, I don't think that kind of mistake happens, but is it really possible to have, port 22, the port open to the anywhere like 000? Is it really, really, really possible? And if that happens, why do we have to like terminate it instead of like remediating the port to like 22 instead of terminating it? I'm just wondering if that is like ideal in like working environment.
Okay, so the idea is in the projects that I've worked on in the past, it was remediated, right? But for the Python project, for this Python project, I'm just choosing to work on it this way to terminate it. You know, it's just, again, the Python project is just to enlighten you. It wouldn't be, it's not, so a good way where this would, a good scenario where you will use this is, yes, I don't want you to look at it from the standpoint of, or if there's any critical application on the EC2 instance, right? From our standpoint, we just want to write a script that does something, which is which this is more security related. If there is any EC2 instance that has critical stuff, yes, it will terminate it, or we can also write our script to stop it. If there is anyone launching new EC2 instance, that is also, if anyone is launching new EC2 instance that the SSH group is open to the world, it would also terminate it as well. So for our project, the main goal is just to look at how we can even write a script like that. So I don't want to focus too much on what if the application has like a critical stuff on it. So, and when we work on this project, you can rewrite your script. You can modify it to do different things that you want it to do. So let's say you don't want it to terminate the EC2 instance, then you can, that would probably be that part of your project where your continuous learning would come in play, where you would just say, okay, you know what? I don't want this script to terminate my EC2 instance. Rather than terminating it, I'm just going to modify the security group or something, or I'm going to remove the rule from the security group. You know, you can do that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that clarity. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So the first thing we are going to do is let's open the first thing we are going to do is open Visual Studio Code, right? Then once we open Visual Studio Code, the next thing we can do is create a folder somewhere on our computer to work on this project. So I'm going to create a folder on my desktop, and I'm going to create a folder. I'll create it in my downloads. And here I'm just going to call it Python project. So once you create that folder, the next thing you can do, once you create the folder, the next thing you are going to do is open that folder in Visual Studio Code. So I've opened Visual Studio Code here, and I'm going to select File, New Folder, and I'm going to select File, Open Folder, and browse to the location where I created the folder, which is in my Downloads directory. And this is the folder. I'll select it and click Select Folder. So once you have opened the folder, the next thing we can do is create an IAM user in our AWS account. So if you have an IAM user and you have your programmatic key set already, you can use that. But if you don't have an IAM user with programmatic access, you can create one in your AWS account. So here, I'm going to create an IAM user in the management console. I'll type IAM and go to the IAM service and select users and click create user. For the name, I'm just going to call it Python user. I'm not going to give this user access to the management console because we just want this user to have access key ID and secret access key. So I'm going to click next. And for the permissions options, I'm going to attach policies directly to this user. And here, I'm going to select the administrator access. Once you check it here, scroll down and click next. So on this summary page, I'm creating an IAM user that is called Python user. I've attached an administrative access policy to this user, and I'm going to click create user. So I've successfully created that IAM user. And the next thing I'm going to do is, once you have created the IAM user, you can click view user to see that user's profile. Then once you are in that user's profile, select security credentials tab. And here, scroll down. Under access keys, click create access key. Then select command line interface, CLI. Scroll down here, acknowledge it, and click next. On this page, you can add a description, but I'm not going to add one, and I'm just going to click create access key. I've successfully created the access key, and the next thing I'm going to do is configure this access key on my computer. So when you guys are configuring it, just configure it as a default profile instead of configuring it as a named profile. Just configure it as a default profile. And how you would do that is by running your AWS configure command in your terminal. So here, I'm going to open my terminal. Since I'm using a Windows computer, I'll open Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to run this access key. I'm going to configure this access key on my computer. I'll run AWS configure. One thing I forgot to mention is the prerequisite. One thing I forgot to mention is the prerequisite for this course the prerequisite for this project is to install Visual Studio Code and AWS CLI on your computer. So in order to run this AWS configure command, you must install AWS CLI on your computer first. I've already installed AWS CLI on my computer, so that is why I can run this command. So I'm going to type AWS configure, press enter. And it is going to ask me for my access key. I'm going to copy it here and paste it in my terminal and press enter. It is going to ask me for my secret access key. I'm going to copy it from here and I'm going to paste it in my terminal. But before I do that, just a second. So once you copy your secret access key, paste it in your terminal, press enter. Then for your default region, it is going to ask you for your default region. The region I'm going to use for this project is US East 1. So I'm going to type US-East-1. And this is based on our AWS region. So if you go under regions here, your regions are listed here, and whatever code is next to your region, that is what you configure here for your region. I'm using US East 1. I'm going to press enter. And for the default output profile, for the default output format, we are not going to enter anything and then just press enter. So that is how you configure your access key and secret access key on your computer. And when you run this command to configure your access key and secret access key, it pretty much creates it would create a file on your computer, and in that file, it would store the credentials. Whether you are working on a Windows computer or a Mac computer, you'll find any access key you configured in your terminal in the home directory on your computer. So on a Windows computer, your home directory will be in the C. Once you are in the C drive, select users. Then in the users folder, you will probably see a folder with your name. On my computer, the folder is called admin. I'm going to select it. In that folder, you are going to see a .aws folder. Select it. And in that folder, you will see two files, a config file and a credentials file. This is where AWS will store the access key and secret access key you just configured. So if I open this config file and select open with, going to open it with Notepad. You can see the region that I configured is here. I'm going to move that here so you can see. You can see the region that I configured is stored in that config file. If I open the credentials file, I'm going to select it and select open with Notepad and click OK. You can see the access key and secret access key that I configured is there, and they are stored on that default profile. So that is the next thing we want to do. Make sure you configure your access key and secret access key as a default profile. I'm going to close this. So are you guys good up to this point?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is click done here. I think someone has a question.
This quick question.
Yes,
But the previous access key we have in our account will be erased.
yes, it would be.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, so the previous key will be erased, and the next time you want to use it, you can reconfigure it, or you can also store the key as a different profile name. You can also store the key as a different profile name so that you can use it. To make everything much simple, I just like using the default profile, because then we don't have to specify the profile name. We can just use whatever default we've configured there. All right, I'm going to click done. And it is saying I didn't download it. That is fine. I'm going to click continue. And that is all we need to do from the AWS standpoint. To start, I'm going to launch 2 EC2 instance in the management console. I'm going to type EC2 and select EC2 instance under services. And I'm going to launch 2 EC2 instance. For this EC2 instance, I'm going to open their SSH. I'm going to open their SSH on port 22 to the world. Again, this is just you can consider it as I don't want to call it like a throwaway Python project, but it's like one of the first Python project I did just to understand how to use Python to script things in AWS, right? So the point of the project is to enlighten you on how to do that. Whatever you are trying to create in AWS, or whatever things you are trying to implement, you can pretty much build from this project and use whatever knowledge you gain from this project to complete that. So for this project, we want to work on terminating any EC2 instance that the SSH rule is open to the world. So one of the main things that I'm also looking to do in this project is showing you how to reference the documentation, where to find it, because that is a big part of it. Even if you are using ChatGPT to write the code, right? You need to understand where everything comes from and just how to interpret the documentation. So that is also another main goal of completing a project like this. So I'm going to create two EC2 instance. I'll call it web server. And it is going to be Amazon Linux instance. And it is going to be Amazon Linux 2023 AMI. Instance type is T2 micro. Key pair, proceed without a key pair. And for the network, we are going to create it in the default VPC because I don't have any other VPC here. And for the security group here, you can see I'm allowing SSH.
So did you say Amazon Linux 2023?
Yes. So it's just any
first one.
instance. Yeah. So under network settings, I'm going to create it in the default VPC. And I'm going to allow SSH from anywhere on the internet, which is one of the main purpose of the script we are going to write. Will look for any EC2 instance that has this. And everything else I'm just going to leave as default. For the number of instances here, I can even create 3 of them. And launch instance. Okay, I've launched the 3 EC2 instance. I'm going to select the instance ID so I can see them. So that one will only filter by the instance ID I selected, but I'm just going to remove that filter so you can see all 3 EC2 instances here. All right, so once you have launched your EC2 instance, the next thing you have to do is just understand how to reference the documentation and pretty much where you find all the information. For this project, this is even one of my main goals, is to show you just how to reference the documentation and how to use it, because that is pretty much where everything comes from. So when you are scripting things in AWS with Python, the documentation and the tool you use is called Boto3. So here we can just type Boto3. And maybe I just type Boto3 and press enter. Right. On the search result, you are going to see the Boto3 documentation here. So select it. And it is going to bring you to the documentation. In the documentation, if you select the quick start tab, right, here it will show you how to install Boto3 on your computer. And these are the things we just covered. First, you have to install Boto3. You were supposed to do that before you start this project. It is one of the prerequisites. So install Boto3 on your computer. Install Python or update Python, right? Then once you have done that, you have to configure your access key on your computer. You can see here. And this is just like I just showed you, where you configured a default profile. And where that credentials will be stored is in the home directory on your computer, just like I showed you, in the .aws folder. Here you'll find the config file, and the credentials file. And once you've done that, you can start writing your Python code. So that's the prerequisite for it. So we want to write a Python code for EC2 instance. So that is going to be the client we are going to use. The best way to explain it is you guys think of Terraform. Anytime you want to use Terraform to create a resource, you have to first look for the resource type to create that particular resource. You guys know to create an EC2 instance, there's a resource type for that. To create an S3 bucket, there's a resource type for that. Something similar, that concept is very similar to Boto3 too. So if we are trying to do something with EC2 instance using Python and Boto3, there is a client that we have to use to do that. So since we are trying to do something with EC2, we have to look for the Boto3 client for EC2. So in Google again, I just always search everything in Google. In Google, I'm just going to type Boto3. Boto3 client EC2 and press enter. So once you search for it, it is also going to bring you to the documentation, right? And in the documentation, you are going to select it here. And this is the client for EC2 instance. So this means that if you are trying to do anything relating to EC2, you are trying to automate any tasks relating to EC2, you will use this client. You can use this client. And here, this is why I'm saying I'm not a Python programmer myself, but using Boto3 to script Python things in AWS, they made it very simple because here it is telling you how to even use it. Just like we do for Terraform, all we have to do is copy this into our code, right? It is telling you you have to import the Boto3 module. Then to use this client, they are setting it to a variable client. And all you have to do is call it boto3.client boto3.client, and in the parentheses specify EC2. Then when you do that, you'll be able to call all these different methods that are under this client. So some of these are all the methods that are existing under this client that you can call. So you can see here, create image. There will probably be one for security group, create subnet. So there's just create VPC. Even the VPC source or even the VPC API and everything is under this client. So that's the first thing we need to do. So here we are just going to go into our Python project in Visual Studio Code. And here, let's create a new file in this. Let's create a new file in our Python project in Visual Studio Code. And when I'm creating a Python script, I like to run my script as I'm writing it. So that way I know if there's any error, I can fix it. So to be able to run your script in Visual Studio Code, the tool that I use is on Jupyter Notebook. So in here, when we create the file, we will just create the extension as the Jupyter Notebook extension. So I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to select new file and I'll give the file a name. I'm just going to call the file check security group. So I'll call it check SG. Check SG dot. The Jupyter Notebook extension is IPYNB. So that is the Jupyter Notebook extension. whatever name you give your file, make sure you have, whatever name you give your file, make sure you don't leave a space, add an hyphen if your file name is multiple name, and add a period and IPYNB. So once you enter that extension at the end, press enter. And that is going to create the Jupyter notebook in your terminal. I mean, it is going to create Jupyter notebook in Visual Studio Code for that file, right? So that way, once you write one code, you can run it immediately, see if it works, then move on to the next code. So according to the documentation, we have to import Boto3. So I'm going to copy this and just put it here I'm going to paste it here. So that's one of the modules we have to import. And next we have to, when you are working on a Python project, there will be several modules you have to import. And it's just based on what you are working on in that project. So one other Python module that we have to import in here is JSON file, because as you guys will see when we make the API call, when we make the request, AWS is going to give us the response in JSON format. So that is why we are adding the JSON module. So here I'm going to press enter, and I'm also going to type import space and JSON, which is JSON. So these are the two modules we will import for this project. Once you type them, you can run it immediately just to see whether you get any error. So you see, to run it, all I did is click this. To run it, all I did is click this play button, and it is going to execute the code you wrote in that cell. If you get a check mark, this means that everything is working properly. Then once everything is working properly, you can move on to writing your next code. To write your next code, if you bring your mouse under this, you will see here, you can either create a markdown, which is kind of like a comment, or you can create another cell under it, which is going to be a code cell. So I want a code cell. I'm going to click that to create another code cell here. And in this next code cell, that is where I'm going to paste my client to call EC2. So I'm going to copy this client and I'm going to paste it here. So this is the Boto3 client that would authenticate to AWS and call the EC2. And once you are able to authenticate, right, you can now perform any different actions that are under the EC2 client. Just like I was showing you in the documentation, there are different things you can do with this one client. So anything that is listed here, you'll be able to do. You can see the list is very long. So once you add this, you can also run the cell. How Python works is Python pretty much executes the code how Python works is it executes the code in the order you wrote them. So let's say you add a code down here that is supposed to do something, right? You can run that code. What I'm saying is don't run that code before you run the one above it, because you need to run them in the order that you wrote the code. So I'm going to run the first one, right? We've already run it, but I'm just running it again. And once you've run the first one, you can now run the second one. And you can see I didn't get any error. This means that I'm able to authenticate. This means that I'm able to authenticate into my AWS environment using the access key and secret access key that I configured. And now I can use this Boto3 client EC2. Right. So remember one thing I said for this EC2 client is that there are several things you can do under it, right? And these things are listed in alphabetical order. If you are not sure what the name is called exactly, you can just Google the description, and you can just type something in Google that is relating to what you are trying to do. Most likely it will give you, the documentation will pick up exactly what method under what client you need to use. But since I've worked on this project before, right, for this EC2 client, we said the first thing we have to do is, since we are trying to find any EC2 instance in our AWS account that has SSH rule open to the world, the first thing we have to do is scan all the security groups in the region. The first thing we have to do is scan all the security group in our AWS account. But the security groups it will scan will be based on the region we have configured on our AWS configure when we configure the access key and secret access key. So here, I want to scan security group rule. So here I can just look for anything security group rule, right? One of the best ways I do it is I can type Control F. If you are using a Windows computer, it will be Control F. A Mac computer will be Command F to find. Then I'm going to type security group. Security. And I noticed for a lot of this, for this documentation, if you notice, right, when words are separated, they use underscore. So I'm just going to use underscore group. So you can see that is limiting the documentation to 15 finds instead of me just scrolling up and down here, right? I can press this drop down arrow to go through the ones that I found. So you can see this one is authorized security group egress, authorized security group ingress. These are not what I want. I'll keep pressing down. Create security group. So if you want to create this, security group, you will use this method. I'm not creating the security group, so I'm going to go down and delete security group. So Ahmed, in your case, rather than terminating the EC2 instance, if you choose to just delete that security group, right, you can use this method. So I'm going to keep scrolling down. Describe security group references. Describe security group rules. This is the one that I want. So this is describe security groups, right? And this is describe security group rules. So what I want is I want to be able to describe all the rules that are in the security groups, because that is where you will find whatever rule is open on port 22 to the world. And if you select this method, right in the documentation, it also shows you how to use it. So when you are using Python to do things in AWS, like I said, the goal of this project is to enlighten you. You can see that you don't necessarily have to struggle you don't have to struggle to know what to write. Everything is kind of done for you. One of the skills you need is how to reference the documentation and also interpret the documentation, which is one of the things I'm trying to show you guys is just referencing documentation. So here under the request, so in Python and other programming language might be the same, but anytime you are making API call, right? When we run our Python code and we are copying whatever client EC2, right? What that means is we are making API call to AWS, right? When you are making a call, that is called a request. Someone actually had this question in an interview, which even me, I didn't even think about it. They asked me afterwards and I didn't think about it. So when you write your code to make some type of call into AWS, right? You are making a request. Whatever AWS gives you back is a response. So here in this documentation, so this is how you will use it. This client.describe security group rule, that will make your request, right? And when you make this request, right, these are the different filters you can have in it. So you can have filter in it, and in it you can specify by if there's a particular security group you want to, there's a particular security group rule you want to find, then you can filter it by that. Or if there is a particular security group ID you want to pick up, you want to scan the rule, you can filter it by this, right? But in our case, we don't want to filter anything. We just want to scan all the security group that is in our account. So we don't have to use this filter in this. But basically what I'm trying to show you is this is making a request to AWS, and whatever response AWS gave us, we are storing it on that response. So the reason why we are storing it on that response is so that when we continue writing our Python code, we can just use it. So if you notice, this response is equal to whatever AWS gives us when we make this request. So that is how this works. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it in my Jupyter notebook. So in my Jupyter notebook, I'm just going to create another code cell here and paste it in there. Right. Once you paste it in there, remove the filter. You don't need the filter part. So it looks like this. For my project, I like to name the response the same name as what I am trying to do, right? So this function is calling, this function would describe all the rules in my account. So I can just call it the same thing. So here, this is what I do. If you want to leave yours as response, you can leave it as response, but I always do this. And I'll paste it here. Right? But I'm just going to add underscore. So I know this response belongs to this function. So I know this response belongs to this function. So you understand what I'm doing? This is a variable, and you can call it anything you want, because as you continue writing your code, you are going to reference it. So this is just a way to store whatever AWS gives us under this variable so that we can use it later on in our code. So that is all this means. So once you've write your code there, you can run it. I'm going to click the play button here to run it. And you can see that ran successfully. Up to this point, are you guys good? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So when we run this code, does it like we're going to receive a response, right?
Yes, we did receive the response, right? So when we ran this code and it was successful, we did receive the response, which we stored under this, right? But I get what you're saying. That is the next thing we are going to do. We can print the response so we can see what the response looks like.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah. So when we ran this code, we got a response and we saved it under this, right? So now if you copy this and open another code cell and paste it there. So remember, we ran the code, it gave us a response which we store under here, right? So now we are trying to, so now we are going to print that response. So click the play button once you copy your response name here, and you can see the response we got. It is going to be in JSON format, right? And it is going to be a long file because it is scanning all the security groups in our, it is scanning all the security group rules in our account, and it has given you all those rules here. And to see the entire thing, you can click on text editor here, and it is going to open it in a text editor for you. Your code is still here on the left side, and the response we received is here when I opened it on the right side. And all you have to do is just look at it. So one of the things I'm trying to enlighten you on when you are working on Python and AWS, it is nothing more than something like this. You are always making a request, right? You get a response. The response is always in JSON. And it doesn't matter how many times you make a call to scan your security group rule, right? AWS will always give you the response in this format. So this is how you avoid later on, let's say you automate your code and you say, how do I know that it is going to do what I wrote in there to do? That is because anytime you make the describe security group rule request to AWS, AWS will always give you the response in this format. So all we have to do now is, this is kind of like one thing I love about using Python to script things in AWS is now you are kind of getting into data engineering, which is why I said working as a cloud engineer and the DevOps engineer is really, really good, because a lot of the things you'll be doing in your role as a cloud engineer and DevOps engineer, you can easily use them in other parts of cloud if you decide to go in there. So for this project we are working on, if we choose to work as a security engineer, you have the knowledge to script different things to do things in your AWS account from a security perspective. And if you are trying to be a data engineer, this is one of the methods they use to pass data. So parsing, and excuse my accent, so parsing means that anytime you get a data from somewhere, you want to filter the data and organize it into the format that you want. Because when we made this, when we made this request, AWS will always give you in this format. But in this format, we don't need all the things that are here. So let's talk about what we need. In this format, you can say it has security group. First of all, it is a dictionary. If you see this bracket here, right, and I don't want to close it. If you see this bracket here, it is a dictionary. It just means that this is the key, right? A dictionary has a key value pair, right? This is the key. And for this particular key, it has another list of dictionaries, right? But I just want you to think about it like this is the key. And whatever is after the colon, which is all this, is the value of this key. So what we want is in this key, we have the value. And in this value, it has another dictionary that has this key and this value, this key and this value. So you can see this is one dictionary and this has a value, right? In the value of this, there is a list of another dictionary. So this dictionary right here, hence here. You can see if I hover over it, right? If I select this bracket ends here, and it is pretty much the same sequence from there. This bracket ends there, this bracket ends there. So when you get your response, one of the first things you should do is just look at it and try to understand how the data is structured. So we want the security group ID, right, which is here. That is what we will use to identify the rules that are in each security group. So that is here. So the next thing we are going to do is, first, we need to filter. We need to start going into this data. So the first thing we are going to do is get the value of this rule. So when we run this to get the value of this rule, you guys let me know if you understand what's going on. Because this rule, right, if you scroll all the way down, that key, if you scroll all the way down, there is still other things in this response AWS gave us, right? We don't need this. So the first thing we want to do is just get the value of the things we need. So for now, we need this security groups rule and whatever the value of this rule is. So we will start working with this data that AWS has given us, and we will break it down slowly until we pinpoint precisely what we want. So in our code, I'm going to, if you want to clear your output, you can do so up here. So clear all output. And I'm going to add another code block here. And in that code block, I'm going to in that code block, I'm going to just use this response that I got, right? And I'm going to do something else with it. I hope that makes sense. So here I want to get, oh, I cleared the response, so that's why you can see here. But I can probably show it again once I cleared all the response. I'm just going to run it again because we need it. So I'm going to, if you want to run all of it, you can click run up here. It will give you all the response again. And my new code is here. This is what I want. I'm going to open it in text editor because you have to keep looking at it just to understand, because sometimes even me, I get confused. All right. So all this response is stored under this variable. So I'm going to copy this variable, right? And I'm going to paste it here. And remember in this response, right, there is a key in it called this. So you can copy this key. That's the name of the key. And what we want to get is whatever value is there for this key. So we'll go back to our code. And in Python, to get the value of a key, you use .get. And in parentheses and in quotes, you are going to paste the key you want to get the value. So what this code means is it will get the value of security groups rule. So we are trying to work with our data and just pinpoint what we want. And also in the beginning of your code, what we are going to do is we are going to store it as another variable that we can use. So for this part, we are trying to get all the security group rules, right? So we can call our variable get security. I'm going to leave a space there so you guys don't get confused. So this is what we are going to run. So here I'm going to type get security groups. And I'm going to make it equals to that. So you understand here, this is a variable. You can call it anything you want. So for this action that I'm about to perform, I'm choosing to call it this variable. So whatever result I get from running this, I'm storing it under this variable. So later on, I can use it. And for this action that I'm about to perform, it is going to get the value of security group rules from our response. So once you type it, run yourself. So we already ran this one. You can see the check mark. I can just run the next one. So once you run the next one, it is successful and it has given us the response. But remember, we stored the response as this. So to see what is in that response, you can open another code block and copy your variable name from here and paste it here. Once you paste it there, run the cell, then you can see the response, right? So the response is here. If you view it in your editor, you can see in this response, we have pretty much cut out all the other stuff that was in the response, the initial response. So here we don't have all the things that was listed at the bottom. And now we are only getting just the value of the security group rules. Do you guys understand?
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it was some sort of like filtering, right?
Exactly. We are just filtering through the response, and we're going to continue filtering until we get precisely to what we want from the response. Because AWS will just give you all the response, and there will be so much information in it. You don't need all the things in it. You might only, for example, in this, all we need is our security group ID, because we can use that security group ID. We can use that security group ID to do other things. But AWS gave us so much response. So AWS gave us so much in the response, and now we are just filtering through the response to extract what we need out of it, then use that along the line later on in our project. Yes, so you are right, Ahmed. Yes, all we are doing is filtering through the response. So this is kind of like what data engineers do. So again, when you work on so much Python projects, if you want to be a data engineer, this is one of the best ways you can learn how to do that. All right. So we filtered our response, and we are now in the security group ID. We want to continue filtering, right? So if you look at this response, right? Now this response is a list, right? You can see it is a list of dictionaries. So in this list, it's just like saying having a list of something. Let's say in a list of something, you guys, I have my name, Aziz, Ahmed, Adewale. So this is just a list, right? And if you look at it, in this list is a list of dictionary, meaning that this is one dictionary, that is another dictionary, and this is another dictionary. So it's a list of dictionaries, right? So we want to be able to go into this dictionary and pick what we want out of it, right? So that is why in Python, if you have a list of something, and I'm not a Python expert, but again, with my limited understanding, I'm showing you how I'm able to break down any Python project that is assigned to me at work, and how I'm able to figure it out, right? In this list of dictionary, right, if you want to be able to go into it and pick the things you want, right, we have to, you have to use what is called a for loop. So the for loop would go into the list, and we can say for all the dictionaries in this list, we want to do this. So when we look at, and when you are looking at it, don't even look at all the dictionaries. We already know the format of this is list of dictionary. So if you look here, the list is this bracket. And if you scroll all the way down, you can see it ends there, right? And the brackets to the bracket, that is the dictionary, right? So you don't even have to look at all of it. Just pick the first two and use that as kind of like your guiding point, because whatever you do with the first two is going to do the same thing with the rest. So we are saying, I want to go into this dictionary. I don't need is egress, IP protocol, front port, and all that stuff. I don't need all that stuff. All I need is the group ID. That is all I need to extract from this security group. So I'm saying for every security group ID, every security group rule ID in this dictionary, I want to get their group ID. So that's what we are going to do next. So in our code, let's come to the bottom here and create another code cell. And how I had a Python tutor when I used to learn Python. His name is Alex, and he is a guy that's in Ethiopia. He used to pretty much explain how things works to me, right? So one of the things he taught me is, because I used to just want to write my code to just get the security group ID. And he showed me in a way where, and one good thing about Python is with Python 2, you are solving problems. And when you write a lot of Python code, really one of the skills in it is it teaches you how to critical think and solve problem. So one of the things he taught me is, since I'm trying to get all my group ID out of this response, right? It taught me to create a variable that is an empty variable. And I'll show you what that means, right? So I'm trying to get all the security groups, right? That SSH rule is open to the world. So let's even talk about this security group, right? In this response, I have the group ID, right? But in my response, I don't even need all the security group here, right? This is the response, but out of this, I only need to extract the ones that the rule is open to the world. So you can see for this one, their front port is -1. I don't need those ones, but here, for this project, we are trying to look for the ones that port 22 is open to the world, right? And if you look here, I have port 22, but it's not open to the world. But this one here, I have port 22, it is open to the world. And there's another security group here, port 22, open to the world. So these are the ones that I want to extract from this response. All the other security groups, since they are fine, we don't need to do anything else with them. So that's what we are doing here. And in our next code, we will going to create a variable. So we can call this variable get security group ID, right? Because I'm trying to get the security group ID with SSH rule open to the world. Remember, this is a variable. You can call it anything you want. So here, I'm just going to type get SG ID with SSH rule open to world, right? So we are going to set it equals to an empty bracket. So it is going to be an empty list. So basically what this means is, in this list from our response, we want to get any security group with SSH rule open to the world. And once we get all the list of the SSH group that's open to the world, we're going to store it in our list. So here, we are just going to scan through this and look for any security group that SSH port is open to the world, which this will be one of them, right? This will be one of them. And for everyone that meets that criteria, we are going to store it in the list. So that's what this is doing. So first, you create an empty list, then press enter here while you are still in this cell. Then now we can use for loop to loop through this response. So the for loop goes like this. You type for item. So this item, you can call it anything you want, right? So I'm calling it item. For item in, right? For item in, remember we want to loop through this list, right? And this response, we called it, when we run our last cell, we called it get security group rule. So copy that name. For item in get security group rule, then we add a colon, then we can specify what we want to do. So basically what we just wrote is for every item in this list, remember, this is an item in the list, and this is an item in the list. So we are saying for every item in the list, we want to do something. So press enter here. Then for every item in the list, we are going to get the security group ID. So when you are in your loop, you can set some variables in it that you can also use in the loop. So how that works is, we'll say for every item in the list, right? Because remember, the for loop is going to come into the list. We are saying for every item in the list, security group ID is get the value of group ID. And it goes like this. So we'll say security group underscore ID equals, we want to, just like we did before when we got the value of a key in the dictionary, we are doing the same thing here. So we are saying we want to get, for every item in this list, we are saying group ID equals, we want to get the value of group ID. So here it would be security group ID. Remember, this is a variable you create. You can call it anything you want. We are saying security group ID equals to item dot get, and in parentheses, you'll put what you want to get. So we want to get the group ID. So select the group ID, exactly how it is spelled from your response, and you will use it here. So make sure when you paste it is in double quotes. Right. So far, do you guys understand before we move on?
We are trying.
Yes, I'm tracking.
Okay, you're tracking it. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, just to, and I'm sorry, I know I over-explained stuff, but I'm over-explaining because it might make sense to different people in different ways. So that's why I over-explain. So what I'm saying is, we have a response here. The response is a list, right? So in that list, it is a list of dictionaries. So when we use the for loop, right? The for loop, we said for item in get security group rule. This list is our get security group rule. So we are saying for the for goes into this bracket. So look at this bracket here. The for goes into it, right? And the item for item. So we are saying for item, for every item in this list, security. Well, let me not explain it like this. So you understand, for every item in this list, we want to get the value of group ID. And we are storing it as a variable. That is what this is doing. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so so that could mean we could extend the group ID to any other item within that list. Let's say we want a group ID and other.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's say you want group owner ID, you can do the same thing. Let's say you want egress, you can do the same thing.
Right.
Right. But for our project, all these other response AWS gave us is not really important for what we need to do, because AWS don't know what you are trying to do. AWS will just give you all the information, and it is your job to filter through it. So yeah, so we are saying for every item in here, we want to get the value of group ID. That is what this code is saying, right? So, and we are also going to, in this code, while we are still in the for loop, right? We're also going to add another condition to it. So press enter and just kind of bring your code down here. Because remember I said in this response, AWS gave us all the security group rule in our account, right? And in this security group rule, we only want to find anywhere where SSH on port 22 is open to the world. Any other rule is fine. So this rule is fine. So we don't really need to bother with it. And this rule is fine. So the ones we are concerned about is where port 22 is open to the world. So while we are looping through it, we can also add another condition in that loop. And the condition can say, while, let's go through, yeah. Okay, so, and I always just pick just one item or two, and I'll use those as my starting point because I know if it works for those two, it will work for the rest. So we are saying while you are looping through here, we can add a condition that says if from port equals to 22 and if IPv4, say that IPv4 equals to anywhere in the world, then we want to perform some action. Do you guys understand that?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So we are in our for loop. So now we will add another if statement. So we are saying loop through the list and find group ID. Also, while you are looping through the list, we only want the group ID if, right? Then this is when we add our if statement, right? If item, again, the item we are looping through, right? If item dot get, remember when you want to get the key in a dictionary, you use the get. I mean, I read a Python book. The first Python project I did is I read a Python book. I think it's called Python for Dummy or something like that. And I did a project. So that was how I understand like things like list in Python, dictionary, for loop and things like that. So we are saying if item in the list, if item dot, we want to get the key. So here we are going to add a parenthesis, right? And a quote. So in our list, right? If you come to your list, we say if item and get from port, right? Because those are the two things we want to check. We want to check our from port. So we'll copy the key from port and put it here. So we are saying if from port equals to, so that will be double equals to 22. And item dot get, right, in the list, right, item dot get. And the other one we want to get is the CIDR IPv4. So we'll copy this. And here we'll say item.get, right? We'll put it in another parenthesis and quote and paste it there, right? And we'll add equals to again. And in bracket, we are going to add anywhere in the world. So we can copy this anywhere in the world here and paste it here. Then for your for loop and if statement, you always have to have a colon there, right? Then you can do something else. So let's finish writing it, then we'll talk about what the code is doing. So we're going to press enter here, right? And so we are saying loop through the list and for every item in the list, get the security group ID. We store that as a security group ID variable here. Then we're also saying while you are looping through the list, right? If in the item you find a rule, if you find an item that has a rule where it has port 22, and for that port 22, it is open to the world, then we want to do something. And what we want to do is, if you find any of those rules, we want to add the group ID to this empty list. So that is how we kind of filter it and we extract what we want and solve it and put it as a variable that we can use later on. So you'll see what it's doing when we run this. So we are saying, if you find any rule with SSH open to the world, we are going to, in Python, it is called append. When you want to add something to a list, you append. So the name of this list is this, right? So we can copy this and paste it here. And this list we want to append, meaning that we want to add the group ID of that item to this list. So type dot append, right? It is showing you here. And you are going to add a bracket. And what do we want to append? This, right? But remember this, we stored it as a variable. So you can just say, we are going to append this. I know it's kind of like confusing if this is the first time you are looking at it, but the more you work on mini projects by yourself, it will make sense. So this is what it is doing. Let's run it, then we can talk about it. So I've run this previous one. I'm just going to run it again, right? Then now I'm going to run this one, right? You see, I ran it and it ran successfully, right? And everything I did in this for loop, right? I saved it in here in this variable, right? So if I copy this variable and I'm going to open another code block and print it here, I'm just going to paste it there, right? Once you paste it, run it, you can now see, right? You can see now that we filtered all this and we turned it to this. So now let's look at it, right? There's one here. There's this one. So these are all the security groups that I have in my account now with port 22 open to the world. So just to show you, if I copy this security group ID, and here I'm going to do Control F, Control V, right? So for this one, let me see. So this one, I'm trying to figure out why it is picking up the port 80. So let me just review my code. If item.get from port is 22 and item IPv4, then append.
I think it is open to the world.
Yes. Oh, okay. I understand. And it's because I'm using the AND statement. So here I'm just, because I'm saying either one or the other. So that is why it is picking up that one too. So this one, it meets one of my condition where it is open to the world. So that is why it is showing it here. But let me just be sure, because I'm just going to run all of it again, just to be sure.
Mr. Aziz, I'm thinking that maybe you should put the condition from port and two port on the two ports 22, 22, and you put the third one too. So the three conditions will be the one to create the open to the world. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Like this two port and you also from ports. So those three will be the basics to run the condition.
You mean another and? State another and?
Yes, like to port 3.
So we can, that's another thing we can probably put as a side note on, maybe you guys that are more Python expert, you can let me know why it is picking up that. So we can leave it as a side note, and later on I can also revisit it, right? Because I guess my logic is when I'm writing this, I'm saying if the front port is equals to 22 and the IPv4 is equals to anywhere in the world, then I want to append, because I'm not using all. So I wanted to meet these two conditions.
It's supposed to work. Assuming it's all now, to choose either of the two. But using and it's supposed to work. I don't know why it's not working.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, right? It's supposed to, because from my logic, how I'm looking at it, I'm saying that it must meet these two conditions, right? And if it meets these two conditions, then I want to get it. But maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. So those of you that are more of like a Python expert, let me know.
Mine gave just one security group when I ran.
So how many security group did you see in your how many security group rule is in your response? Do you have more than one that is
Yeah, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 of them in the list. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, and it only picked the one that meets the port 22 and anywhere.
Okay, so you only have one port 22 that is open to the world in your list.
I have one that is open. I have 2 that is open to the world, but only one for 22.
Oh, okay. So for you, it only picked the port 22 open to the
Yes,
world.
exactly.
Maybe I need to update my Boto 3 thing, which I don't even know how to update it, right? Because I've installed Boto 3 for a long time. And maybe I need to update Python. Maybe that's why it is doing that. But what Adewale is getting is what we are supposed to get. And that's what I'm supposed to get here. But I'll figure out that issue later on because I know my logic is right because I've worked on this before, right? So it is only supposed to pick anywhere where port 22 is open to the world, but I'm not sure why this is doing that. But let me just copy this one and paste it here. It cleared that. So I'm going to open it again. Control F, Control V. So it select that one and it also select other ones that port 22 is open to the world. That's fine. I'll figure it out later. All right. So now that we, at least we got a list, right? Even though I'm getting this list, I can still work with this list. It's not going to affect anything I'm trying to do. So we have the list, right? We can now work with this list. So this is how you take a response that is this big and turn it into something like this. Then you can now work with this one. So we are pretty much almost done with this project. So now that we have our list here, right? The next thing we are going to do is like 2 parts to this project. We have described all the security groups in our account that is open to the world, at least in my case, but it was supposed to be port 22. All the security group rule in our account that's open to the world, right? And the list is ready. So now the next thing we are going to do is describe all the EC2 instances in our account. Get the response for that. We are going to work with the response. Then once we work with the response, we will now compare, because if this security group is the logic that I was thinking about is, right, which is one, again, why I love Python. If the security group is in our account, then it is likely attached to an EC2 instance, right? If it is not attached to an EC2 instance, that is fine. The main goal is that we don't want any EC2 instance with port 22 open. So we need to get all the EC2 instances in our account.
Oh, can I interrupt you?
Sure, go ahead.
I think I see where the error is coming from. In my own code, I put my condition in bracket, my if condition, but I can see yours is not in parentheses.
Which one? Where?
Your if condition, yeah, the two, yeah, like put after the if, put everything in parentheses. Yes, that item to before the equality sign. Yeah.
Which
after,
one?
Yeah. Then after the IPv4, yes. Let me see. No. It's gonna be It's gonna be at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before the colon. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So that's perfect. So I need to. Okay. Let me run it and see. Then I'm going to run that. So what we have is still the same. I think it probably has to do with my software is not up to date. That's why. So I'm running all. You can see I'm running all here, right? And it's still giving me the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So my code is the same as yours, right? But it might just be like I just need to update something in my software. Yeah. Because it should just only give me the port 22 one. Yeah.
Right.
So I haven't updated Boto 3 in a while, so that could be an issue. So I'll figure it out once it'll be this my side note for this project. Okay, so but thank you. Like I was saying, we need to now get all the EC2 instances in our account. We'll review their security group. Then we'll compare the security group of those EC2 instances to the security group in this list, because we know the security groups we have in this list have port 22 open to the world. And if any EC2 instance security group matches the security group in this list, then we will take an action on that security group. So Ahmed, this is where, for that, when we get to that portion of the project, whatever you want to do with it as an extension of the project, you can do that.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to add another code block here, right? And the next thing we are going to do is find the method in the documentation to describe, because pretty much we are trying to describe, and that is what this means in AWS, right? Anytime you are using Boto3, if you are trying to see what is in your account, they typically use describe. Excuse me, at least that's what I've noticed. So at least that's what I've noticed. So we are going to go back to that documentation, and we'll go back to the EC2 client, right? Here, we want to describe instances, right? Even if you don't know what it's called, type something close to what you think it would be. So we know we want to list all our EC2 instance. So I'm going to press Control F here, and I'm going to type instances. Instances, right? It's giving me 37 result. So, and when I was looking through it, this is how I looked through it. I'll just press the down arrow here and keep going through it. You can see describe instance here, right? If you select it, and another thing that I always do is I read the description, because let's say I'm working with it for the first time, I don't know what it does. You have to get in a habit of reading the description. So here the description tells you, describes the specified instances or all instances, right? So this is telling you, you can either describe a particular instance in your account, or you can describe all the instances in your account, right? Then if you scroll down here, you can also see the request code. So another note that I'm saying is that in AWS, right, you are not, what am I saying? Even though we are using Python, but if I had to sit there and code the way Python programmers code, right, I'll probably be lost, right? But here they are giving you the documentation that makes it easy for you. So all we are going to do is copy this, right? So once we copy this, we would go back to our code, right? So again, another thing I want to show is just like Terraform, when you see the code, right? In it, they have filters, right? And for the showing you all the things you can filter by. So you can filter by image ID, instance ID. So this is if you want to filter by a particular EC2 instance. And on that filter, they're just telling you how to enter it, right? You see, here where they have instance IDs, right? You put instance ID here. For the filter, right? They have affinity, right? You can put affinity there and whatever the value is. Architecture, you can put architecture there and whatever the value is. So they are just showing you how to use it. But we don't need to worry about that. We just need to copy this code and we'll paste it here. Then once you paste it there, we can remove everything here. All right. Then once we remove everything, we are going to run the code. So we can run it here. And that has given us the response, right? But again, I like to just call mine the same name. So I'm just going to copy this and put it here. Because for everything, they just call it response. So to be more descriptive, I'm going to paste that there, and I'm going to add an underscore. So I'm saying for describe instances, it is describe instance response. So since I've run it, I'm going to now copy this describe instances, and I'm going to add a new code and paste it here. Right, so I want to print my response. So if I run it, why is that giving me an error? Oh, okay. I didn't run this after I didn't run this after I change it. So I'm going to run this again. Then I'm going to run this. So this is why I use Jupyter Notebook, because if you write all your code at once and you go and run it at the end and you start getting a bunch of error, for someone that's a beginner, it will be difficult to try to pinpoint where your error is. So that's why I like using Jupyter Notebook. I run it as I'm writing it so I can pinpoint if I have any error. So when we are describing our EC2 instances, right, all the EC2 instances in our account, it is also giving us a response. And in this response, you can see AWS will just give you everything. It is always in JSON, and you can see how long the JSON is. No matter how many times you describe all the instances in your account, AWS will give you this response in this format, and it's in JSON format. So the first thing is you have to look into it and see how the data is structured. So you can see here, the data is a dictionary, right? And in the dictionary, there is a key called reservations that has value. So to even do anything else, right? So there's a reservation as the value, right? And in the value, you can see we have the instance ID and things like it has the instance ID, it has the subnet ID, and in it also has the, where is it? It is very long for the EC2 information. So it has, let me just see. Yeah. It has all this information, right? I think it will be under networking. So yeah, right here, right? It also has the security group ID. So if we look at this information, right? Reservation is a list of dictionary. So we can just start from there. And if I scroll down here, it would probably have additional things at the bottom we don't need. So like all these ones at the bottom, we don't need them. So when the data gets so complex, the first thing you should do is just get what you need out of it. Then it will make it easy for you to interpret. So for now, I know everything I need is in reservations, because reservation is a list that ends somewhere here. So I'm just going to write the code to get all the values out of the reservation first. Then I'm going to work with that. So I'll add a new code down here. Then when I add the new code, I'm going to call it get reservations. Right. Okay. We must spell it. Reservations. Get reservations equals, right? The response. Remember our response name is describe instance response. Right? So we want in our describe instance response, which is this here, we want to get the value of the key reservations. So copy the key name, because it has to be exactly what the name is. Copy it, and we are going to use, remember what we use is the function is get. We're going to type get, and in parentheses and in quotes, we are going to paste that there. So that is going to get the value of reservations. And once we do that, we can run it. Right, that ran successfully. I'm going to add another code, and I'm just going to print my get reservations. So I'm printing get reservation. I'm going to print it here. So now you can see we have get reservations. If I open that, right, in that now we can see it a little bit more clear. Now we have a list of dictionaries again. So this dictionary is like a list of dictionary, and in this dictionary we just have key value pair, even though this is a list, but we're not worried about. Yeah, we'll worry about it, but you can see this dictionary is another key value pair. So this means this is one item in this dictionary. This instance ID, this instances, right, is a list that starts here and ends where does it end? It's long. It ends somewhere here, right? So, and I'm probably gonna be staring at it all day. I wish I'm probably sure there's probably a way, like if there's a way I can, once I pick this, I know it'll highlight where it ends for you, but if there's a shortcut that I can click on that will show me the end of this item. So I'm not sure if anyone knows that, but so technically, right, this is a key and this is another key, and this key pretty much has a list of dictionaries. So which all of this are all values to this instance. And I think it goes all the way down, but I just can't see where it ends now, and I don't want to spend time looking for it. But when we look at it, really though, this is in this dictionary, it has things, and this instance, let me just try to look for it. And if I can't find it, we are just going to write our code. Okay, you know how I'm going to do it. Yeah, this is how I always find it, right? So we know we have instances here, right? Let me try to look for it by instances. Okay, so from what I can see, this instances asked the information for all of our EC2 instance and all of the EC2 instances here, right? So meaning that there will be in the list of dictionary, there will be AMI launch index. So let me try to filter it by this. So this is one of the ASUs I go through when I'm looking for it, right? So this is how you can try to visualize the data. So now I'm filtering it by this. You can see where the list in this list, right? You can see this is information for one EC2 instance. And if I press down, you can see this is another information for the other EC2 instance. And if I press down, this is the information for the other EC2 instance. And if I press down, this is the information for the other EC2 instance. It makes sense because, so basically what I'm saying is this whole item, if I can scroll up, this is a list in the dictionary. So this is how it's broken down, right? In this dictionary instances, this is one item up here, which is long ends here. And after that one, this is the second item. And this is the third item, right? Which makes sense. And in my AWS console, I only have 3 EC2 instances. So this matches what I have. So basically, we want to get the value of instances. That's pretty much what I'm trying to explain. So in our Jupyter notebook, we can add a code, and we are going to, again, create an empty list. So you can call it get instances. Get instances equals to an empty list, no, not a dictionary, a list, right? Then press enter. Then we are going to loop through our list. So remember, we stored our list as get reservations. I'm sorry, I haven't been looking at the comments, so I'm not sure if you guys. Oh, thanks, Adewale, for posting that. Okay, thank you for posting that. So remember, we store our list as get reservation. So we are going to do the for loop through it because get reservation is a list. So anytime you have a list, in order to access the items in the list, you have to loop into it. So that's why here we are going to use the for loop to loop into it. So we are going to type for item in get reservations, right? Which is our list. We are going to press enter. Then we are going to set a variable that says instances equals get this. So we just want to get anything. We just want to get our instances, right? So I'm going to copy this instances key here, and I'm going to say instances. So this is just a variable. You can call it anything you want. So I'm calling it instances, right? Equals item, right? For every item in that list, I want to get the key, the value of the key instances. So in quotes, I'm going to paste that key there. So remember, this is just a variable that I created. You can call it anything you want. I'm saying while you are looping through this list, I want to get the key instances, and I'm going to store whatever that response is as instances. Right? So once we do that, we can also, right? Once we get the key for instances, then we can append it to our list here, get instance list. So while we are looping through it, if we find for those items, we are going to append it to the get instance. So here, going to type get. I like copy pasting. So when I'm showing you guys, I always want you guys to copy paste so we don't accidentally type anything. So here we going to append, when we loop through this item, whatever we get, we are going to append it into the list. So I'm going to get instances dot append, and we are going to append the variable name here. Then I'm just going to add another code at the bottom, which is my get instances. And I'm going to put that there so when we run it, we can see what we get. All right. So I'm going to run this. That was successful. Then if I run this one, right? So you can see we pretty much are narrowing down the list. We are narrowing down the response so we can only get what we want out of it. So now if I look at this one, right? So you can see now it has been narrowed down to, now this is a list within a list and a dictionary. So this is all data engineering work where you are pretty much filtering the data. And there might be a better way to write your code to be able to pinpoint it directly. But as a beginner, this is how it is easy for me to write it. So I just work with the list, getting what I want out of it, then working with the next one, getting what I want out of it. Right. So now that we have the next list, so we are still on, even within this list, right? This is one, if I control F here, you can say it's giving me 3, which makes sense because I only have 3 EC2 instance is running. So that is one item in the list. The other EC2 instance information is here, and the other EC2 instance information is here. It's just like when you are working with EC2 instances, the information is very long. So, all right. So now let's add another code line here. And we are going to, since our response is a list and a list. So it's a list within a list, is a dictionary within a list that is within a list. I know it's kind of complicated, and sometimes it can get even more complex than that, right? So remember, when you have a list, you use for loop. So another logic we have to work into this code is that we only want to get the EC2 instances that their state is running. So if the EC2 instance state is running, let me see if I can see if this is running, right? So you can see code here. We have three. I have three EC2 instances, right? If I press down here, you can see all EC2 instances are running. So what if an EC2 instance is terminated? Because you guys know when you terminate an EC2 instance, it is not going to, AWS will not remove that EC2 instance immediately from your account. So possibly when we run this code, it might still pick it up in the information and show you the information. And when you run your code, as you guys know, you can't take any action on an EC2 instance that's already terminated. So when we are writing the logic for our next code, we want to filter out any EC2 instances that has been terminated. So to start, we are just going to create an empty list. So we'll call this list get only running and stop EC2 instance. So here we will type get only running. So this is just a name I'm making up. Only running and stopped instances. And we will set that equals to an empty list. Right, so this list, we are going to only store the IDs of EC2 instances that are running and stopped. Anything that is terminated, we are just going to ignore it. So press enter. Then we will start our for loop. So for the for loop, we'll type for item in, remember the name of our list we want to loop through, which is this list. We want to loop through is get instances. So I'll just copy it from here and paste it here, right? For item in get instances, we add a colon, then press enter, right? Remember, it is a list of a list. So now when we loop into the first one, then we have to loop into the second one to even be able to access the item. So while we are in the for loop, then we'll add for. We can call this one item 2, right? The second list. So when you type item here, you can say for list 1 for list 2, right? You can call it anything you want. So now I'm saying for item 2 in item, right? You understand? So when we loop through the first one, that was the first item. And when we loop through the second one is the item in the first item. So that is why we have for item in get instances, that is our first loop. And for our second loop for item 2 in the first item. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. So once we loop through the second item, we can press enter. Then we can add an if statement now once we loop through twice, we are now in the list here, right? So the good thing about this list is it is just, from what I can see, it is just key value pair, right? So there's nothing else we have to loop through. So in our code, we can say if statement item 2, item 2 dot, we're going to get a key from it, right? And the key we are going to get is state. So we are saying if this value here, state, right? Remember the state. Right. We want to get the state, and this state is a dictionary. So what another thing you have to, and this is where Python kind of gets a little bit complex, but that's as a beginner. But the more you can sit down and play around with it and look at it, you will understand. So here we want to get the value of state, but state is also another dictionary. So state here means that when we get the value of state, if you just say get state value, right? If you just say get state value, it will give you this. This is the value of state. But within the value of state, we don't want all of this. We only want the value of name in the state. You understand? So state is another dictionary. So we have to write it in a way where we are just getting the value of name in state. So how you will write that is you say get state. So copy state, right? Copy state and in double quotes, paste it here. Then at the end of it, outside of the parentheses, add dot get again, and in parentheses, add a quote. Then you can tell it you want to get name in the state. So copy name and paste it here. All right. Then outside of it, add double equal sign and type terminated. Terminated. Okay. So what this means is that if we have any EC2 instance that's terminated under the state of that EC2 instance here, the name will be terminated. But now, because my EC2 instances are running, that's why the name is running. So here, that's why we are putting terminated here, because we don't want to pick any EC2 instance that's terminated. We only want to pick the ones that are running. So here, once you type that, add like a colon. Then what we are going to do is type pass, right? So that is something you can use in Python. We will finish writing this code, then we can cover it. Then press enter again. Then type else equals, else not equals colon, right? Then we want to append that item 2, right, in our get only instances run. So for this list, all we are doing is we are looping through it. If there is any EC2 instances in here that the state is terminated, we will ignore it. We will ignore it. And if there is any EC2 instances that the state is either running or stopped, we would add that EC2 instances, the information in this list, to our get only running and stop EC2 instance. So I'm just going to copy this, right? And paste it here. Then I'm going to type dot append. And what am I trying to append? Item 2. So again, we're still working with the list and we're still filtering through it. So this is what we are doing. So I'm going to create another code block, and I'm just going to copy this list now and paste it here. So if I run it, All right, that ran successfully. Now, if I run this one, you can see it will still give me the same one because I only have all my EC2 instances are running. But the logic we just wrote was for when we have an EC2 instances in there that is terminated, and we definitely want to ignore them. So that was why we wrote that logic. Then the next thing we are going to do is we are going to get the information of our EC2 instances here. So we want to, how do I explain it? So the thing we want to do is, in this EC2 instance, right, we want to get the instance ID. Now that we have only filtered it by instances running, we are only going to get the instance ID out of it, right? Then we're also going to get the security group information as well. So let's write the code, then we'll talk about it. So I'm going to start a new code. And again, I'm going to add an empty list. It is going to be instance. Give it a name, any name you want. So I'll call it instance info equals empty list. Right, I'm gonna press enter here. So again, I'm going to loop through my list. So it will be for item in this variable, right? I'm going to add a colon. Then I want to get the instance ID. So I'm saying for every item in my list, I want to get my instance ID. So I'm going to copy my instance ID here. And you can just call it, you name the variable instance ID, instance underscore ID, and set it equals to item dot get parenthesis instance ID. So you understand, we are looping through this list, right? For loop will loop through it. For every item here, we want to get the value of instance ID, and we are saving it as a variable called instance ID. So while we are looping through it, we are also going to set another, right? Because when you are looping through this item, right? In this item, this is where every EC2 instances have a security group that is attached to them, right? So that will be here. You can see the security group ID. Every EC2 instance has the security group attached to them. So while we are in the for loop, we can set a variable for the security group. So just call it security group underscore groups equals to an empty list, right? So we are looping through it. We're already getting the value of instance ID. So we are creating another variable called security group, empty list, and we'll press enter. So now we need to, while we are looping through it, because if you look here under security group, so yeah, let me show you. Where is it? Right here, right. One of the issues I had wasn't an issue, but something to think about is these are key value pairs, right? But in this security group, right, the value for this security group is also another list. And the reason why this is a list is because you guys know for an EC2 instance can have multiple security groups attached to it. So that is why if there is an EC2 instance that has multiple security group attached to it, they will be listed in this list, right? So that is why in the response AWS is giving you, and if you guys think about it, it always makes sense. In the response they are giving you, whether it is a string or a list, it makes sense, right? And you can see here, let's take subnet ID, right? An EC2 instance can only be in one subnet. So that's why the subnet ID is just one. But for security group, an EC2 instance can have multiple security groups. So that's why this is a list. So while we are trying to get the value of this here, we have to loop into it, then get the value of the group ID. Does that make sense? So that's what we are doing here. So while you are in the code, right, we've set our security group as a list. So we will loop through that security group to get the ID of the security group. So here we are just going to type for security group, security group. I'm just going to call the SG group. So this is just any name. You can call it any name. In item, right? The item we are looping through, which is this one, dot. Then we want to get the key, right? We want to get the key security groups. Right. So we are looping through it and we are getting the key for security groups. Then also within the key for the security groups, we only want to get the group ID. So you can see this is a list. So we are looping through it. And once we are in the loop, we only want to get the value of group ID. Anything else, the group name, we really don't need it, right? So that is why down here, while we are in that looping through the security groups list, we are going to say security. We can create another variable, call it SG group ID. So this is another variable you are creating, just giving it any name. Equals to, right? This SG group, right? Because that is the loop you are in. Dot get, right? Remember when we are looping through it, right? The first loop, we call it SG group ID. So while we are in that loop, right? Anything we get here, right, is in the loop SG group ID. So we want to get the value of group ID. So that's why we are saying here, while we are looping through the SG group ID, because that's what we call it, we want to get the value of that group ID. So again, parentheses and paste that group ID there. Right? Then press enter. Then the next thing we are going to do is our security group here. We are going to append. So pretty much we are getting the EC2 instance and the security, all the IDs of the security groups for the EC2 instance, and we are appending it to the security groups, right? So that we pretty much trying to get the information for the EC2 instance. So here we are going to type security group, right? So this security group, you can just copy it from here. Dot append. We want to append the group ID. So this is the second for loop we are. So basically, I know it might seem a little bit complicated, but once we are done and we run it, it will make more sense to you. So the last thing we need to do is we want to append both instance ID, right? And our security groups, right, to our list, right? So here we are going to, in your for loop, but you have to come back one, because that was the first for loop, but we don't want to do it in this is the for loop for the security group, to loop through the security group and get the group, the security group ID. So we want to come back to our original for loop, which is this one. So remember, we are looping through this item. Then when we got to the security group, we loop through that. Once we get all the information, we want to come back to the main loop we were already in. So that is why you have to be here. So for that one, you are going to use your instance info, and you're going to type dot append, and in a parenthesis, you want to append your variables, which is instance ID from your first loop, comma, right? But before you append it, right, make sure you append it as a list. So type a list here, just a bracket. In the bracket, right, you want to append your instance ID and also your security groups. Does someone have a question?
There's a
Okay.
typo with the append.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you. So we want to append our security group. We want to append our instance ID and security groups. Let me make sure I'm getting the right one. So we want to append our security groups, which is this one. So. All right. Then let me just add another code, and I'm going to add the instance info so we can really see what's going on. I mean, sometimes when you are working on it, it's just what I'm saying. If you guys want to exercise your critical thinking skills, work on Python project. It will really stretch your critical thinking skills, because especially when you are working with stuff like this, just looking at it seems difficult, but it's something you can do. All right, so the code is ready. I'm going to run this. That was successful. Thank God. I'm going to run this. Now you can see what I'm getting, right? So basically what we did here is we took all this information of our security group. I mean, we took all this information of our EC2 instance, right? We got the instance ID, and we got all the security group that is attached to that EC2 instance. So the reason why we have this in the list is because, like I said, your security group, your EC2 instance can have more than one security group. So we want to account for that. In cases where there might be an EC2 instance that has 4 or 5 security group, we'll be able to add them to the list here. So that is why we have it in this format. So not only when you are filtering the data, you have to also understand the data you are filtering, in what format do you have to store it so that you can use it the next time. So let's say we don't have a list here, and it finds an EC2 instance that has more than, and we can test this on the fly. Let me go back to my management console here. And I'll take this web server, right? I'll take this web server, and I'm just going to action, security, change security group. And here, I'm not going to add SSD. I'm going to add that security group. And I'm going to add a default security group. So I'm adding multiple security group to the EC2 instance, right? So I've done that, right? Now I can come back to my code and I'm going to just run all here. So that has run all. You can see now this EC2 instance has 3 security groups, while this other ones has 1. So that is why we add that logic to it. Okay, so we're almost done. So now that we pretty much have our EC2 instance, right? We have every EC2 instance that's running in our account and the security group that is attached to that EC2 instance, right? Now we want to compare the security group ID of the EC2 instance to, where is it? To our security group ID here. Remember the security group ID here? Remember the security group ID we got here is the security group that is open to the world. So we know any security group that is in this list, SSH is open to the world, right? So all we have to do is now that we have our EC2 instance list with their IDs, we will compare the IDs to the ID of the ones that's open to the world, right? And if we find a match, we are just going to take an action on that EC2 instance that matches any ID, any security group ID here. Does that make sense? So with your Python code, right, the main thing you are focusing on is solving the problem. If you understand what you are trying to do, there's so many layers to it. There is you trying to solve problem, and there's also you trying to write that logic into your code to solve the problem. But I feel the first step is to understand what you are trying to do. So in this logic, we got all the IDs of the security groups that's open to the world. We know these are the security group, right? So now for our EC2 instance that we got all the IDs to, right? We are going to compare the ID to the other IDs. If there's a match, then we will take some action on the EC2 instance. All right. So let's add another code here. Then to write the next one, we are going to create another variable. You can call that variable EC2 with SSH rule open to the world. So here I'm going to type EC2 underscore with SSH rule open to world and set it to an empty list, right? So we are getting all the EC2 instances in our account, right? But we now want to filter it by just the EC2 instances that has SSH rule open to the world. And how we would know which EC2 instance has SSH rule open to the world is we will compare the security group ID of the EC2 instance to the security group ID we created previously that confirms that some security group are open to the world. So that's what this code would do. So remember, this is a list, so we are pretty much looping through this list, right? So this is the list we are working with. We are looping through this list. So since this is since this is a list, we'll type for item in the name of this list is instance info. So I'm going to copy it and paste it here. I add a colon. For item in instance info, then we can set it as a variable. You can see in instance info, it is also another list, right? But in this list, there is something called indexing, right? So whatever is in the first one is index 0, and whatever is in the second one is index 1. So you guys understand it. So if you have a list, let me show you something. So if you have a list that's like this, so this is a list, right? Let me just this. So if you have a list, what Tom is at index 0, Aziz is at index 1, and Ahmed is at index 2. So that is what this means. So sometimes you may want to work with specific item in the list. And how you would do that is you use index. So that's what we are doing here. So while we are looping through the list, right, we will say instance ID, right? The item at index 0 is our instance ID. So let's create a variable. We'll call it instance ID equals item at index 0. So how you specify that is bracket and 0 in it. Then press enter. Then you also say security group rule. Security group ID, right, is at index 1. So you can see instance ID is at index 0. Security group ID is at index 1. So yeah, we will set that to a variable. Just call it security group ID, right, is at item 1. Right. So we are looping through it, and we are just setting some variables that we can use in our loop. So we're saying while we are looping through it, any item we have at index 0 is the instance ID, and any item we have at index 1 is the security group ID. So once we've set that, right, we can now add another for loop. So let's type for items. So remember, this is a different name. I call it items, not item. So because since our security group, right, let me escape. Since our security group ID is a list, right? Remember, anytime you have a list, always think for loop. Since our security group ID is a list, we have to loop through it. So we'll say for items in security group ID. So let me just copy it so I don't make mistake, right? Security group ID. We add a colon, right? Now, this is what we'll do, right? So remember, we are looping through the list. We set the variable. Now we are looping through the security group ID. So we'll now add an if statement that if any item in this security group IDs match any ID. I see that. Scroll too fast. Match any security group ID here, right? We are going to do something with that EC2 instance. So that is what we are writing here. So we'll say if items, right, in get, so to just show you, right, we are saying if items in get, right, get SSH, get security group ID with SSH open to the world is here. We are saying if item in get, so we can scroll up here to where you have this variable and copy this name. Or you can also type it. I just don't like typing because sometimes I may have a typo in it. And I really don't like debugging Python code since I'm still like a rookie at it. So we are saying if items in get, right, get security group IDs with SSH rule open to the world. That was the first one we created that I showed you, right? We had the colon. If items in there, right? So we are looping through it. We are now saying for items in security group ID. So I'm saying for items in security group ID, we are saying for items in security group ID, if the same item is in get security group ID with SSH open to the world, meaning that the other list I just showed you, if any of this item is in there, then we want to do something. So that's what this means. Then we want to, right? If the item is there, we want to append the EC2 instance ID to this variable because we are only trying to get EC2 with SSH rule open to the world. So here we are just going to write EC2 open to the world, right? Here, dot append. And we only want to append the instance ID because that is what we need. We will need the instance ID to take the action against the EC2 instance. So here we can copy the instance ID variable and paste it here, right? So now we can copy this variable, add a code and paste it here. So I'm going to run this. That ran successfully and I'm going to run this. So you can see I now have a list with all the IDs of the EC2 instance that SSH rule is open to the world. So at this point, do you guys have any questions? For those that are following, is everything checking out the way it's supposed to check out? Or do you guys just give up along the way?
We are still with you. We're rolling with you.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
I know it's a lot, but I'm telling you guys, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I am someone that used to tell myself I don't like to code, but I always tell you guys, approach cloud engineering from the standpoint of you solving a problem, is not coding. If you know what you are trying to do, I'm telling you, you'll figure out how to do it. So these are the security group that I have with SSH rule open to the world, right? So let's test it. I'm going to go to the management console. I'm going to launch another EC2 instance. I'll call it test. I'll leave all this option as default. But what I'm trying to do is I'm creating another EC2 instance that is not open to the world. So for this rule, I'm going to limit this to my IP address, right? And yeah, so that's all I need to do. So for this, I'm limiting to my IP address and launch 2 more instances with the same setting. And I'll click launch instance. All right, I've launched those 2 EC2 instances. I'm just going to go back to my EC2 instance dashboard here. I'll remove this filter. And now I have 5 EC2 instances, right? These web servers one are the ones that I had previously, these web servers are the one I created previously where the SSH rule is open to the world. And the test one, under my security groups, right? For 22 is not open to the world. So if the logic in my code works the way I wrote it, right? By the time I scan this, I should only still have this 3 security group at the end of my list here. So I think the EC2 instances are running now, so I can just, I'll leave it here and I'll run all my codes again. So you can see, I ran all my codes. You can see here, I have now 5 EC2 instances under my EC2 instance info. It picked up the 2 EC2 instances that I just launched, but at the end of my list, which is what I really want with the EC2 instance that's open to the world, it is only 3. So my code is still working the way I intended it to work. So this is the last code we are going to write for this project. So now that we have our EC2 instances with SSH rule that is open to the world, this is where you guys can take whatever action you want to take against it, right? So Ahmed, if you want to stop the EC2 instance, you can stop it. If you want to remove the ID of the EC2 instance, you can remove it. But for me, I want to terminate it. That's just, I'm just testing that for this project, right? So that's where we go back to the documentation, right? And we'll go back to our EC2 instance client. Then we can look for the method that we can use to terminate EC2 instance, right? So here, these are the methods. If you don't feel like looking through it, just Control F and let's type terminate instances. So you can see here, terminate instances. Right, select it. So this is the documentation to terminate EC2 instance, right? And you can say shuts down the specified instances. This is what we want. For each of those methods, they always give you a code for it, which is your request code, right? So you can see here, all this request code requires is instance ID, a list of instance ID. And guess what? We created our code to do, right? When we created our code here, we filtered it to a list. So we've already done that part. All we have to do is just use this client now, right? All we have to do is use this client and instance ID. So copy it, right? So once you copy it, go back to your code. Then, another one thing and I'm not really an expert at this, but when I ran this code, one thing I did is okay, how do I explain this? So what if we run this code and there is no EC2 instance in our AWS account, right? Then the code is going to fail because it's going to, once we run it, we say we run this command to terminate an EC2 instance, and it says, I can't find any EC2 instance in your account. Then this part of our code will fail. In Python, there is a way you can write your code that when it runs, even if it fails, it's not really failing, because if you don't have an EC2 instance in your account, then that is what it is. But instead, rather than the code failing, we'll just tell Python, this is what we expect. So how you do that in Python is you use try. So you type try, colon, and press enter, right? Then here you are going to paste the code you want to run. So for us, paste that code you copied from the documentation, but remove everything here. Remove this here, remove this dry run. And I like to put everything on one space here. So you can see what's going on. So this instance ID, you can even backspace to move it here, right? And do it like this. I'm doing it this way so you can see it, right? And like this. Remove the comma too, right? So that is the code to terminate an EC2 instance, right? And it has a filter instance ID, right? And the instance ID expects a string, right? A list of string. So this list of string, right? Remember this, that is this value that has our instance ID in a list. So rather than, so basically what I'm saying is for this list of string here, we can remove that and replace it with our variable for the instance ID. All right. Then once you've done that, you can press enter here. Then then press backspace to come under the try. Then type accept. Once you type accept, add a colon and press enter. And we are going to type a print message. So type print, parenthesis, right? Then in a quote, you can just type whatever you want to print. So for the print, we can type no instances has a security group rule with SSH rule open to the world, or whatever you want to type. So it's just a message that gets print back out in cases where we don't have any EC2 instances that are running, right? Or any EC2 instances with SSH rule open to the world. So we're going to type no instance as, I'm not even sure if it's correct English, but all you English folks, please help me out. No EC2 instance has a, I'm just going to type this, security group with SSH open. So I'll type that, right? So this just means that when we run it, right? If we don't have any EC2 instance that SSH is open to the world, the code is not going to fail. This code is not going to fail. It's just going to print this back up. It is going to print this back to us saying we don't have any EC2 instance with SSH rule open to the world. So let's run it. And when I run this code, it should terminate these 3 EC2 instances from my AWS console. So I'm going to run this. And that ran successfully, right? And if I go back to the management console, I'm going to refresh here. You can see I have 3 EC2 instances shutting down. And I have 2 EC2 instances that I run. I'm going to launch, I'm not even sure. I'm going to launch another EC2 instance with SSH rule open to the world, right? So I'm going to just select all these options, proceed without the key pair, and I'm going to create SSH group. I'm going to add the SSH traffic from anywhere, which is going to be open to the world. And let me just launch like 8 EC2 instances. And I'm going to click launch. And I'm going to go there. I'm going to remove this so you can see I have this EC2 instances pending. And I'll wait for them to change to running state, then we can run the code. But in the meantime, do you guys have any questions?
Okay, in the meantime, I just want to thank you for this demonstration, this project. And if I'm right, I noticed that while writing this Python code, we are making use of mostly dictionary and list. So is it right to say that those two should be something one should know very well how to loop through them, use different methods to, work on data stored in Python dictionary and list, just to be able to work on, AWS resources, because most of the response on AWS are turned out in JSON, which is mostly in key pair, key value pair, form.
Yes, exactly what you said is exactly the reason why we are doing this project. You said it perfectly, right? It's just to enlighten you so you can see, right? If you guys see, the difficult part is writing the code and looping through it. But if it seems difficult to you, it is only because this is probably the first time you are writing it. But the more you write code to loop through dictionary and list, you'll get used to it so fast. So if you already loop through dictionary and list in one project, what I do is I'll reference my other project where I loop through a dictionary and I'll see how I did it. And I'll just keep doing the same thing. Because I don't write Python code very often, I forget. But if you are writing it very often where you are looping through dictionary and list, or list and dictionary, list and a list, it can get complex like that. If you are writing code pretty often where you are looping through that, you already know majority of the things you need to do with AWS when it comes to scripting with Python. Because majority of the time, I know my code is very simple for those that have Python knowledge where you can write complex Python code. But yes, Adewale is what you said. AWS response is always going to be in JSON format, which will be either a string, a list, or a dictionary. And if you understand how to loop through them to extract what you want out of it, you pretty much are good. And that's the point of this project. So we have my EC2 instances are running, which I have 8 EC2 instances, right? So if I run all the codes again, you can see my code ran successfully. My code ran successfully here. You can see all the EC2 instances. I got all the instance ID with SSH open to the world, and I ran it here. So if I go back to my console and I refresh here, you can see those EC2 instances are shutting down. So the next thing you can do is you can hook this Python code to a Lambda function, right? That gets triggered when something happens in your AWS account. So in the project that we worked on, in the project I work where we use this, right? We triggered the Lambda function anytime someone launched an EC2 instance. So when you see them use it, this is sometimes where they use it for security. So if you're also talking about you working as a cloud security engineer, I'm telling you, your DevOps experience, your cloud engineering experience, DevOps experience allows you to really work in any of those fields if you want to work in it. You might have to learn 1 or 2 things in security or 1 or 2 things as a data engineer, but the core of your DevOps skills is transferable to those fields. So this will be considered partly data engineering and partly security. Now that we have this code, we can hook it up to a Lambda function that gets triggered when someone launches an EC2 instance. And in my work environment, when we did it, even though the action we took against the EC2 instance was not terminated, it would just go and modify the security group and change it. So that is what we did in that environment. So I will give you guys that homework assignment. If you guys can modify this code instead of terminating your EC2 instance, you can change it to remove the rule from the EC2 instance or modify the rule, right? So this is where I had the try except, right? So now that I don't have any EC2 instances with security group open to the world in my account, what will happen when I run this code, right? You can see, rather than the code failing, it printed back, no instance has a security group open to the world. So that is pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions?
Yes.
Sorry, sorry, Aziz, I missed the start of the class. Can you just briefly explain the like the project again? I think you mentioned earlier, was it a real life project that you had to work on?
Yes. So at work, we had a Python script that was triggered by a Lambda function that anytime someone launched an EC2 instance, it would scan and find, and it would pretty much scan the security group of those EC2 instance. And if the EC2 instance has an SSH rule open to the world, it would take some action against it. For this particular project, we just wrote it that if a security group has SSH rule open to the world, we are terminating the EC2 instance. That is what we did in this project.
Okay, can you scroll up? How do we determine if the port is open? Did we do that earlier? I must have missed it.
So here, so at the beginning of our code, the first thing we did is we scanned our AWS account. So, and this video is going to be available after this class.
Yeah.
Immediately, it's on YouTube, so you can watch it, right? So this, we use the EC2 instance client to scan. We use the EC2 instance client to authenticate to AWS, and the EC2 instance client comes with a bunch of methods that you can use to do different things.
Yeah.
One of the methods is describe security group. So we scanned all the security groups, right? Which gave us this response, right? In this response, you can see that in the response, we have some ports here that's open to the world. So from here, all we are just doing is passing the data and filtering through it and extracting what we want out of it. So here, we extracted the security group ID, right? So once we did the rule ID, it limited us to this. Then once we've done that, we pretty much go into there and we find any rule that has SS or 22
00. Okay.
And has 00. And that was where we got the list over here. So once we have the list, we called all the EC2 instances in our account. Also passed the data to find the instances, right? We find here we are just passing the data. So we passed the data here. And that brought us to, so this is still all passing the data. So that brought us to this point where we will find the EC2 instance. We will get the EC2 instance ID and the security group attached to it. Then once we find the EC2 instance and the security groups that is attached to that EC2 instance, here is where we make the comparison, where we are comparing this list, this information to the first information of the security group rule. We got the list. And if any security group has an ID that matches the other security group ID, then we can terminate it, which is what we did, right? So if any of those, let's say any security group here, I'm saying security, any EC2 instance here has, this is the EC2 instance, and this is the ID for the security group, right? So when we compare it to the first list of all of our security group with SSH open to the world, if the EC2 instance has the security group, we append it to this list. The reason why this list is empty now is because I don't have any security group with SSH port. So now that we have our list here, we can use it to run this method to terminate any EC2 instance that is in this list. So that was what we did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
All right, cool. All right. Does anyone else have any question?
So my question is, are we going to demonstrate how to hook this up to Lambda function in the next class, next section or what?
Yeah, so the main thing I wanted to do with this project is show you guys how to write the code, and we run it, test it, make sure it works. Yes, if you guys want us to hook it up to a Lambda function, we can do that tomorrow or sometime this week. So I'll check with you guys when you guys are available, and tomorrow or next week, or not next week, or later on the week, we can hook it up to a Lambda function that takes some action. But I have to also play around with it and see what type of how we are going to trigger the Lambda function. So there's like different ways you can trigger the Lambda function. Most likely it would probably be when we create an EC2 instance, right?
And we can trigger with Event Bridge, so we can use
yes,
Event Bridge. Yeah,
exactly, right. So something we can all play around with, and you two, you can also do a research on it. Then if you guys want to meet back up tomorrow, and we can hook it up to a Lambda function, and that'll pretty much be it for this project.
Yeah, Aziz, I would suggest we meet tomorrow, please, because it's kind of fresh in our memory with this project. I know for myself, I honestly kind of got lost to some extent when you were doing your for loop and other stuff. I call it magic. So yeah, but I think tomorrow if we can hook it with the Lambda function, to finalize the project, it would be nice.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so that is how. If this is the first time you're working with for loop, anytime you work with something for the first time, expect it to be complicated. But the more you work with it, the easier it gets, right? So working with for loop and looping through a dictionary and a list is the first time. Once you have a code that works, you can always reference that code. And if you need to loop through another dictionary, just reference how you did it in your previous project. That is what I always do. And now that we have ChatGPT, right, you can use ChatGPT, but I don't recommend you guys using ChatGPT for the first time to write the code for you if you don't understand, at least on a basic level, how to loop through things. So on a basic level, you need to understand that. And also, what we did here is more than writing the code. It is trying to solve a problem. So how do you go from finding all the EC2 instances with SSH port open to the world, and what are you using to solve that problem? So in this case, we got all the security groups that is open to the world. We got all the EC2 instances and their security group. We compared the two, then we use that information to terminate the EC2 instance. That is another skills in itself, which involves using your critical thinking to solve a problem. We also reference the documentation. That is also another skill. So there's more to it than just the code, but I'll say the more you do it, you will understand it. So the first time, even now, it's still very complicated to me with certain things. But when I write the code, I just reference what I did before. So
during your time when you were doing this project, I was just wondering, was there ChatGPT to help you, or you had to use your initiative?
No, I didn't use ChatGPT for this project when I worked on it. I wrote this. I've had this project about 4 years ago. When the original time I created this, I wrote this code about 4 years ago. So, which is why the main thing I'm emphasizing on this is just, and my code is so simple and so basic. Like if you ask ChatGPT to write this, I'm sure this will be in a function and all that stuff. And I don't even have mice in a function, right? So For me, I like keeping everything basic, keeping everything simple, make sure it works, right? And also, one of the main things I'm emphasizing is just understanding how to reference the documentation. So, yeah. All right.
Yeah, I mean, this is very helpful, especially for those that are, actively interviewing. This is something you could easily say you've done,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So when you asked about your scripting experience, this is one of the projects you can say you've done. We also have another one in our account with the S3 one,
Yeah.
with the S3, right? I've also written some in the past that does different things. So, but these are just like simple ways you can script just a quick thing in AWS to do something. And imagine if you have like 4, 5, 6, 7 projects you've done with Python that does different things, and you're able to share that, that would also impress whoever is interviewing you. Granted, you have the opportunity to share it. And again, I'm not trying to make you guys an expert. You guys will be an expert at your own time based on the work you put in. My goal is just to enlighten you, show you that, okay, this thing, after all, this thing doesn't look hard. I just need to do this. I just need to do that. That's my goal, and that's what I'm trying to achieve by showing you guys how these things work. So, do you guys have any question? I know it's late. I want to keep you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aziz. I really appreciate your effort. And for the person that asked, that made mention about the for loop looking like a magic, I just posted a W3 school link there. It has different, you can go, the Python course there is like a crash course, very simple, straight to the point, just click on Python. It won't take you time, compared to going through textbook that may, appear daunting, but this
That
is
is true.
yeah.
That is true. Yes, when I was writing the code way back when too, I did use this site for certain things too. Yeah. If you are trying to understand certain things about Python, and if you just need a quick crash course on Python, yes, this would be a very good site to use. Thank you, Adewale. Yes, this would be a very good. Like I said, my knowledge of list in Python, dictionary, index came from me just reading that Python for Dummy book. And I was doing the mini projects they have in it. So I understood that. Then when it came to using Boto 3 to script things in AWS,
$1 or do you
right?
want to double it, give it to the next person?
So when it came to using Boto 3 here, I just know, okay, I just need to copy this documentation, right? And I just need to add whatever the values that I'm supposed to add to it, and I'll be doing what I need to do. So again, I want you guys to keep it very simple and think along the lines of solving problem. Take it one step at a time. And I guarantee you, before you know it, you'll be very good. I'm telling you, at work, what you guys are doing now is probably the difficult thing. At work, they don't expect you to know it all, but they expect you to be resourceful and know how to solve problems. So if they tell you, oh, we want you to work on this Python project that does this, you can tell them, no, I don't know it though. And I can't, no. You can't tell them that. You have to be able to, okay, map out your research phase. What do I need to do? What do I need? Where are the documentation? And how to interpret the documentation. I feel like in the learning stage, one of the things we underestimate the most is troubleshooting, even understanding how to reference documentation. It is more than just doing your project and deploying the application and making sure it works. Part of your learning experience is also understanding how to find documentation and referencing documentation, which is why sometimes when someone gets frustrated when they are taking my project and they'll say, oh, what did someone get frustrated about? Copying something from their Mac computer, which is just you copying like something that is already on your Mac computer to your EC2 instance, and you are getting frustrated that I didn't show you that process, right? That is not the right mentality. it is, you understand what you need to do, right? Which is copy this and paste it somewhere. Then you have to be able to do the research. If you don't understand it, you have to be able to do the research to be able to figure it out. That is also part of your learning journey. I'm telling you guys, every little details every little thing you do along this journey adds to the big picture of the type of cloud engineer you will be. But I'm telling you, at work, they expect you to solve problem. They don't expect you to know it all. You don't have to be an expert, but they expect you to solve problem. And that is pretty much what I'm trying to show you guys. So the takeaway from this project is more than the for loop, because the for loop, like I said, Ahmed, you can use ChatGPT to teach you that. But the takeaway is just, okay, how are you going to start organizing your data so that you can use it at the end to terminate your EC2 instance or whatever you need to do? Where do you find those information in the documentation? So those are the main things that I want you guys to take away from this project.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, this is Frank. I'm Frank. So I just want to thank you so much for the tutorial today. This is actually my first live tutorial session with you guys, and I must comment that it was really impressive.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I know I
So,
need to meet with you, so
all
maybe
right, sir.
after you can stay after.
All right, sir. Then I've got a question, and I just want to add one or two things to those preparing, both those just studied and those preparing for the interviews. So the thing is, considering the cloud practitioner, I would suggest you guys equally try to look into AWS skill builder. So that's something that would teach, like you study to get badges. It's not like a certification, but trust me, if you pick, because it's like a course, like the way you study to go and write your practitioner and solution architect. But yes, but it's at the end of the day, you gain free badges. It's true, it won't really show up on your resume that much. They don't really consider it that much, but you will be amazed with the things you study, especially those still just studying and those preparing for their interviews. Just go and search AWS skill builder. There's a lot there. There's a part for where architected framework. You learn all of the foundation, best practices, everything you need to know. Serverless, those who want to learn about Lambda functions, security, services on AWS, everything. You would see everything there. You study it from the foundation to being an expert. Database, the same thing. The type of database you need to use, when to use them. In fact, there are things you don't even know so far. And even this practice, the practices we're doing with you right now, they're going to learn all of the foundation, the fundamentals you're trying to explain to them is going to help them. That's straight from AWS, from experts from AWS.
Yeah.
That's something I did last year.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I second to that. Yeah, it's a very nice platform, because after I went to Udemy to purchase one of those this thing for solution architect by John something, and I was still finding it a little bit difficult to understand some things. So I had to go to AWS Q. If you go to that AWS Q builder, they're gonna teach you like they're teaching a baby. You understand?
Yes, exactly.
Like everything is broken down in pieces. You will understand everything.
They
So
would
I went in
explain
there
everything you need
I
to know.
started from cloud practitioner, and I was able to understand something. As in, you will understand everything.
You
If you
could
just
study
try,
skill builder and
yes.
pass
I
script
love the way he broke everything.
practitioner.
AWS did tried. So you have to take your time you don't have to skip and start jumping. Just start from the beginning and take your time. You understand everything bit by bit. It's a very nice platform.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you should start from that even before taking practitioner and solution architect. And even if you are a professional or whatsoever, I think just going through skill builder is going to help you take some certain decisions at work. It's very, very important.
Very good. Because even before you go to Udemy, I would advise. I've been go to Udemy and I was finding some things difficult to understand. And when I learned about AWS Builder, man, I was like, so this thing is like this. It's very, very simple to understand. That even somebody that doesn't even know anything about IT can just get through easily. It's easy. It's a
So
very good
before
advice.
purchasing your courses, before you guys purchasing courses to pass,
Yeah, and some of them are
like
free
practitioner
before
or
you
the
start
like,
purchasing some. Yes,
yeah.
it's very
So
okay. Yeah, thanks for that
all
idea.
right.
Yeah.
No, I know you're welcome. So, sir, I had a question too. So I've been taking those projects on my library, but I went through the spreadsheet already, and I saw how people put in their information, like when they complete the project, the stages, how they move it on Jira board. But now I've been doing the projects, but I haven't been putting mine on it because I see people have been piled in groups. So that's something I wanted you to explain to us. So I didn't just want to go there and start doing things in a disorderly manner. So I wanted
Oh
you to.
no, yeah, it's fine. So the Excel sheet is just for you to track your progress and making sure that you are completing with the project before you move on to the next one. Initially, when we started it, we had a group, but we really don't have the group anymore because everyone's schedule is different and everyone is working at their own pace. So with the group doesn't really matter anymore, but you can just use the Excel sheet to track your own progress. It's kind of like everyone is using it at their own pace now. So that's
All
what
right.
the Excel is meant
All
for.
right.
Yeah.
So when they complete the last question, please, when you complete your project, do we have to send you the requirements you needed
Yes.
to?
Yes.
So how are
So
we going to send it to you? Sorry.
in Jira. So in Jira is where you create your ticket and post it there. So I
All right.
haven't been, I will check it this week, but even if I don't get to the Jira thing in time, the main goal I just want to expose you guys to is just even understanding Jira, how it works. So when you are working on the project, just use that Jira board to practice moving your ticket from one column to the other. And that is the purpose of the Jira again. I don't want you guys to get to the interview and they're asking you saying things like, okay, what agile methodology have you used before? And you have no clue what Jira is. Because the same thing happened to me when I got my first job. I don't even think I know what Jira meant. I didn't.
Yeah, that's
So I want to expose you guys to pretty much everyday tools that I'm using at work. We have Slack here. We use Slack at work. Um, Jira, we use that at work, right? So things that I'm doing almost on a day-to-day, and that's what I'm trying to expose you guys to. So yeah. So
all right.
even if I don't get to those things, you can still play around with it, create your ticket in Jira, move it. Once you are done with the project, move it to done, because that is exactly what you'll be doing at work.
All right, sir. I get it. I just wanted to know how I was going to send you the project because I'm on the WordPress now. So
Okay.
I'll be done with that. I should be done with it tonight
Okay.
and tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
All right. I'll be waiting for you after the Zoom meeting, then I'll stay back.
Okay, sure.
Talk more. All right. Thanks, sir. I really
No
appreciate it.
problem. No problem. Hello, DJ Black. How are you? Yeah, so that is pretty much it. I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long. It is 11:19. So that is it for this project. The point is to show you guys. The point is to enlighten you on how certain things work. Then you can take it from there. Do you guys have any questions before we go? Thank you, Franklin. I'm going to paste. Someone was asking in YouTube what that link is. I'm going to paste it here. Deborah, I'm going to paste the link here.
Hello, Aziz. Are we going to continue tomorrow, right?
Yes, that is based on if I can figure out the Lambda function part, because I haven't done that part before. So I haven't done I've done the different triggers, but I haven't done the one with the event bridge. And it's based on if I even have time. But I'll try to work on it. I'll try to work on it tonight. And if I figure it out, I'll let you know and we can just do the demo. And if you guys figure it out too, let me know and you can do the demo as well. So
okay, but another thing is you didn't start by 8 though, because I was just going to YouTube and I saw that you started I think you started later than 8, right?
yeah, around 8:10, you know, around like 8:10.
Okay, because I was on
was
YouTube when I just saw it and I just quickly looked in on Zoom.
Okay. You know, when um, you can always message me in Slack and just ask me like, oh, when am I going to start
That's okay. No problem.
the class? Because that was what I think KOV did. I think it was KOV that asked me. Then I was running late on something and I was trying to set up certain things before I started. So I apologize for that.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to thank you for everything you do, because what you're giving here for free, I'm telling you, some people tell you to go and bring 3,000 and they will never give you as much as what you're giving. I just appreciate your follow up with all your members and all that. You did more than they expected. Really, thank you
You're
for your
welcome.
time and everything. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. You're welcome. And I've been through I'm telling you guys, I came from wherever you guys are now, where in your transition state, I was there. And I want to be as transparent and as honest with you guys as I can be. As you guys see, I always say, as you even guys can see, I type like a turtle. Like a lot of people know how to type better than me. Like I'm still be typing, looking at my keyboard, right? But the the main thing is just solving problem. And if you can think of it that way, you'll be fine. So for me, you don't have to pay me 3,000 to do it. As long as you guys are willing to learn, I would be willing to teach you what I know. But obviously, I have a platform where I make some type of money from it. That is good enough for me. So I don't have to charge you guys 3,000 to do it.
Aziz, I will tell you one thing, Aziz. What you've taught us is nothing compared to what people charge outside. Listen, people literally charge a fortune for this thing and probably not as deep as what you. I'm telling you a fact.
Yes. Yeah.
Which,
Because you have this humility and selfless service you're giving to people. People are even, if you even have question, the way they even respond back to you, like what you are paying for, you don't get the value for what you're paying for. I'm telling you, I know what I'm saying. But you are giving more than enough of what you're even doing on this platform. You're doing a good job. People are not even
Thank you.
saying it.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, and again, if you guys know people that are trying to transition into the cloud, I like what Franklin said, right? There are a lot of resources you can use to get you started. Really, the resources are not even the problem. The problem is having someone like me that's going to show you the right thing. Like, and that's one of the main things that what my platform is about. I really just want to, because there's so much information online, and when you start going through all the information, you will get confused by the amount of information. Every time I talk to people, because or someone said, I was speaking to someone on Saturday, and she said that she was trying to be a cloud engineer. Then she heard that there's no job. Then she's going to be a DevOps engineer, and there's no job. Now she's trying to do DevSecOps, and it's based on the information people are telling her, and it's just getting her confused, right? So I try to take away all that confusion and just tell you, I'm telling you, this, follow this print from beginning to the end. Then once you follow this, you can build on that by doing other project. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, sir. Can I add something to what you just said about someone complaining that they said there's a lot of the job market is too tight right now, or the like?
Yeah, go ahead.
I would tell you that, considering that, I think you give a lot of benefit of the doubt to people talking like that. Like the lady I'm talking about, in regards of the lady, when you say it's because of the information she gets. I will take an example with myself. I've been studying cloud since last year, and I haven't had my first job yet. Trust me, be it someone who is starting to study now, and people who have started before me, and people who have been there mid last year till now, we all get these stories from people. Even my close people tell me the same thing. My family, everything. I feel like it's just, there are people now getting to the cloud not because they love the technology, but because of the money.
Money, yeah.
And I feel like it's not like I feel like I actually know she's part of those people. And that's why it's going to be tough for her to get into something like that, and she's going to waste her time.
I agree.
So, yeah, so don't give her the benefit of the doubt based on that. It's not because of the information, because we all get that information. I'm still studying. I just got into your platform just now. I told you I was studying with you on YouTube as a member since last year, and I've been studying this. When I just got into the US, within my first month, I started studying cloud. Until now, it's been because I've been here it's barely 1 year, few months, like 6 months now. So yeah, so I had a lot of difficulties with paperwork, and you just got here, you try to set it in, but I still stick to it, and I'm still studying it till now.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, just take that away, sir. Don't give her the benefit of the doubt. Let her not. She's fooling herself. Don't let her convince herself first before you try to.
Yeah.
That is true.
Sorry
Yes.
to cut you. I just want to add to what he was saying because I recently got to the market. And well, the only problem I'm having in the market is traction. I have a resume, and the resume is not getting enough traction as compared to the number of applications I had. But at least with the ones I've done so far, I'll tell you one thing. I had 3 solid interviews. When I mean solid, those ones that were genuine. I've had calls from some guys from India, literally, of course, you know what I mean, just to like get my information and nothing meaningful. But like he said, if you are really passionate about this journey and you follow every other roadmap accordingly, and you've done your certification at least, in that process you will know a lot of stuff. So I think out of the 3 interviews I've had, I will tell you for a fact that most of them are proceeded to the final stages. And I'm, currently, I know this is on air, we may edit this one out, but I'm currently, waiting for feedback. And the thing I am really proud about this journey so far is that the way I'm able to face this panel. Today I had one with somebody with about 23 years of experience, about 2.5 decades or so in the field of software as a whole. And I was there literally answering practically most of the questions he was answering. And to some extent, I lost him because I was taking him more, related to AWS level, where some of them have minimal knowledge. But I was really sound in that interview, as at least based on my understanding. And this actually happened because of other, extensive work I've done behind the scene. And when she was saying, hey, she want to go to DevSecOps or she want to go to cloud engineering, DevOps, all these things are intertwined one way or the other.
Yes, exactly.
Because what she doesn't know is that if you're using Docker to build images, that is another level of DevOps. If you're doing all these things, so if she says she wants to do DevSecOps, it's just like she doesn't really do her homework. I think it's important for people to understand that when you start this journey, the least somebody should think about is getting a job, at least for now.
Exactly.
Understand what you're doing first. And as time goes on, you now like unravel to, okay, I know this, I know that, and how can I put my resume out there and go? I think that is just what is happening. So
I
to
agree.
end this conversation, I know for sure there are jobs outside, but how you can know all these things technically quite all right, like all this we're doing. One thing I experienced at the time, at the early phase of my interview, where I know these things as is. I tell you this, I understand what you've taught us. I think if not for my work, I would never miss your Saturday classes. But now, one day when I applied for my first job and I had an interview, I couldn't talk about these things. Down from ordinary spinning a server, I couldn't put the words together. So when I now realized that, hey, technically, if you know something 10 over 10, but you can't communicate it, then that's equally you knowing nothing. Because how does the other person on the other end know that you know it if you don't talk about it? So that's when I started writing everything down, what I have done. I read it every day, like if I'm reading a journal or newspaper. And at the end of the day, I will sit down with someone, talk. I will say what I know. And it kind of resonates with them because that is what they do in their own environment. So everything has to, not just the money, you have to work on yourself. Communication wise, understanding everything fundamentally rather than just doing the hands-on and it works. You cannot even
Exactly.
I promise you one thing. You see this Python thing, all this for loop thing, I do not really understand them, but I can talk about Python as if I've done it to anybody and they will believe me because I know how to communicate about it. So I think it's a lot of work involved. And I think if anybody that is listening, if you're new or you're probably been in the field for a while, let's not think about the money. We should think about having that traction, talking our way out of, that kind of situation and getting the job. So
True.
Yeah. Thank you, Ahmed. That's where I have to come in. I tell people that one thing you need first of all is you need to have that confidence. People can do so many things technically, but can you describe what you're doing? Like, do you know what you're doing? That's why I see people on your platform at times they just do compare paste. It's not about you going to just copy what you are seeing. Like, what do you want to do? How do you want to do it? You need to document it, understand it. Understanding matters. You understand what you are doing, not just you just want to assess. Why do you want to go to a private? You want to access to a private subnet? Why do you understand? I'm saying know what you are doing. So if you know what you're doing, then you don't look at how do I want to do that this thing. You can go to AI, ask questions. From there, you have that. There's no limited knowledge. It's just bit by bit. If it is 1 hour you want to dedicate a day, do it. Like me, I have opportunity to like to do studying like every Saturdays, like 24 hours on Saturdays. I'm always available to work. But maybe 1 or 2 or 3 hours in a week, I try to like squeeze myself into do something. It's something that you have to put in yourself, and you have to put passion in it as well, because it's something you want to earn money from. So you want to help this figure. What is something you are putting in? If you don't put anything in here, you can't get something on the other hand. It's not magic.
That is true.
Hard work has to be there. I keep saying it. So, and there's one thing people don't know is that when you do a project and you're stuck in between, and there are times that even I might be pushed to call you or to message you. I just like, let me not disturb you, and I'll try to figure it out. Go to YouTube, do my research searches and all that, and at the end of the day, I would get to the other hand, and I would pass through it. That's one thing. You're beating yourself. That's one. Is bit by bit. There's some things that I've done before I even come to the group that I was able to do. And when I got to your this cell, like I just started from group 3, because I know I've done those things. You understand? So you have to make make use of the free things you are seeing on YouTube. There's some people on YouTube that their name are not even they're not even known at all. You understand? But they will explain things to you like they explain to a baby, and you will understand what they are saying. Do your researches. Just keep searching. Before you know it, I just bless God the day I met your I came across your page, because I have tried to just keep going around. How do this thing work? And I didn't give up. Keep searching before I knew. It was 2 pages I came across one other man like that. But the other man was charging much more, like times 3 of what you're charging. Do you understand what I'm saying? But I just didn't give up. Even though I'm paying for your platform, but I still go to other ones to like add more knowledge. I'm not staying in one place, because I know where I'm going to. I know that if I'm going to be facing an interview, I have to give them the proof I know what I'm doing. You understand? So there are some things that you don't even know is going to come out like next year or next 2 years that you don't even know as well. So if I'm going to a complaint and I don't even know about those technologies and everything, if I can't give them the confidence, I can stand and learn more. Do you understand? They will not even want to. They don't want to employ you, because they know that since you can do the one thing and you can explain what you are doing, you know what you are doing, you can adapt to more technologies that are coming up in the future. That's what they want to see in you. So I tell people that fine, you say they want to come into IT. You're coming to IT. IT is not a joke. Can you face can you face it? Can you just can you have that resiliency to just stay in and just keep bouncing back? But it's not as if you want to just come there and just be looking and you just want to do little things. It's not magic, it is hard work.
Yeah.
And it's engineering. You have to be able to just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yes, that is true. So everything you guys have said is true. And that is what I always try to tell you guys. For those that are listening, it is not a quick thing. You can't learn DevOps engineering in this 60 days or 90 days. It's so funny now. I see ads that is always telling people you can learn all this IT in like 90 days and 60 days and all this stuff. But I'm telling you, if you are, for those that are listening, if someone is telling you they can teach you whether cybersecurity or DevOps engineering or cloud computing in 90 days, most likely they just want to tell you something to get you to. You'll find out real quick that after you start, it's going to take more than that for you to learn. And the only thing I don't like is for those joining the boot camps, or like for those joining like one of those Zoom calls, because I get a lot of those people, and the lady I spoke to was from that boot camp, right? Well, from a different boot camp she took. I don't know where she took the boot camp from. When you guys join there and they already give you the false expectation, that kind of mess with what you expect to get. So even when I was talking to her, I was getting the sense that she didn't want to go through the project. She just seems like she wants to get to the part where she is job ready. And I get that a lot, especially for those that have taken boot camps before. But I always tell you, I don't care what boot camp anyone has taken. If you come to me and you ask me to show you something, if you are telling me you are job ready, I'm going to give you a task. And even just based on me speaking to you, I can tell whether you are job ready or not. And if you don't know some of the basic things you need to know, then you would have to, regardless of how long you were in the boot camp for, you would have to start all over again and go through the information I'm sharing with you. So my advice is don't focus on how soon they can get you the job, because if they are telling you you can get the job in 30 days, 90 days, they are just trying to get you to sign up. And after that, they probably won't refund your money. But it will take at least, I'm saying, dedicate 6 months to it for you to just even familiarize yourself with the information. And from there, it is up to you. Every individual is different. You might be able to learn the information at a faster pace than some people, but it is something that requires time and effort. You would have to put that effort in. And like I always said, my projects is kind of a gift and a cost, because I'm showing you how something works, but I'm also telling you, don't just do my projects and complete it and say, yeah, I'm done, I already did it. No, you have to understand what you did in that project, which is why I'm also extending it to the assignment and trying to make sure you guys complete the assignment on your own. So thank you guys for chiming in and saying all. I think it sounds much better when you guys say it, because you guys are on the learning journey. Because if I say it, it might seem like I'm just trying to get you to sign up, which is, I'm still struggling with trying to get people to sign up for stuff, because I don't tell people, oh, sign up for my program, because I don't want to sound like a salesman. But I'm telling you, I really care that you guys get a job, and I really care that you guys learn what you are supposed to learn. And I'm telling you, there will never be a time where you would have to pay me $3,000 to learn any of these things. It is not that serious. I've already recorded the video, it's there. Most times when you guys sign up, I'm sleeping. So there's no reason to charge 3,000 for it. So I'm glad you guys are saying it. And yes, just be careful about boot camps that you join. If it is a high price boot camp, don't let the selling point be how soon you can get a job, because it takes time to learn all the skills. It does take time. So, well, I'm surprised you guys are still here. Thank you for joining today. This was a
Yeah, good
fun
night.
project.
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Bye. Business.
As is,
Yeah. So yeah, frankly, I'll meet with you. So this was a fun.
as a quick question.
Yeah.
I see that I see that the 1 year is the price has come down to, I think, 499 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to upgrade to the 1 year because I was on 6 months. How do I go about it?
Okay. I would send me a message on Slack, and I will see how I can adjust it for you. Or maybe I can just like even give you a coupon towards the 1 year one, and we'll adjust for whatever time you spent on the 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll figure it out.
All right, I'll send you a message on Slack. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah. So that is it. And please, I need you guys' help. Please help me share. Since I'm such a good salesman, not to say the wrong word on myself, right? Please, I need you guys' help. Recommend, share. I really do care to teach those that are willing to learn. You know.
I've shared your stuff on my bootcamp.
Oh, good. Thank you.
On the bootcamp I came out from. So
Oh, good.
I think someone joined or something, but I've
Okay,
shared
good.
it.
Thank you, Mr. Sonny. So I'm surprised you came out of bootcamp and you're still working as if you didn't take any class before. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, Deborah is 8 p.m. US Eastern Standard Time. So,
Yeah.
Eastern
Aziz,
Standard Time.
everyone, good night.
All right, good
Yeah,
night.
great
For those
session.
of you that are here, good night. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Yes, Deborah is US Eastern Standard Time. It's 8 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night. All right,
Yeah,
Franklin.
thank you so much. Yeah.
No
Thank you.
problem. No problem. Bye. So Franklin, I'm going to end the YouTube live, and
All
I'm
right,
going
sir.
to you can rejoin back right after this.
All right, sir. I'll do just that.
All right. Okay, Deborah. Oh, so I think UK, you guys are 6 hours ahead. So I don't know what the adjustment is, but just put it in Google as US Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. and it will tell you what that will be in your time. So just try that. But I'm going to sign off here. Thank you for joining, Deborah and DJ Black. As always, thank you. I appreciate you. I wish, I'm sure one day we'll meet in person, or maybe like virtually in person. Thank you, DJ Black, and I'll see you guys hopefully tomorrow by God's grace. Bye.